Welcome to The Big Picture, a show that takes a deep dive into the political landscape of not only America, but right here in our own backyard of Illinois.
It's showtime, folks.
The Big Picture is on WCPT 820. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath.
It's a hot one here in Chicago. I hope you're comfortable where you are. And please settle in, because I have something important to talk about right now, and I'd like you to get settled and just take a minute with me here. Because if democracy has faced a comparable challenge, it was 1940, after France had fallen. Americans gathered around their radios, much like we are here, in fear as they learned the terrible news. Paris fell on May 14th. A puppet government was installed and negotiated surrender to Nazi power. In England, the government of Neville Chamberlain collapsed and Winston Churchill became prime minister. He told the country that the Battle of France was over and the Battle of Britain had begun. We are in that moment. It's not an exaggeration to say that a consolidating tyranny engulfs our federal government and overwhelms the checks and balances we counted on for protection. It has progressed to the point that this week Donald Trump ordered that every research grant from the federal government go through political screening before being awarded. It has gone so far that universities are accepting federal oversight of their admissions and their programs. It has gone so far that CBS News has allowed the administration to install a government monitor to look for signs of bias in its reporting. And yes, it has gone so far that Donald Trump is free to ignore some limitations on his unchecked whims. Mr. Trump now ignores court orders, and his lawyers stand accused of lying in federal court. Judges that do not rule in his favor are threatened. His administration ignores laws passed by Congress, including fiscal appropriations and the establishment of departments. His access in Congress has given him every increase in coercive power they possibly can, including more than $160 billion to build out a national police force accountable only to him and a network of national concentration camps to hold anyone he declares a threat. Like many of us today, our fellow Americans in 1940 were scared. So on the evening of May 26th, President Franklin Roosevelt called the nation to gather around their radios for what was to be his 15th fireside chat. He began by describing the horror underway in Europe. He said, "Over once peaceful roads, millions are now moving, running from their homes to escape bombs and shells and fire and machine gunning. Without shelter and almost wholly without food, they stumble on, knowing not where the end of the road will be. I speak to you of these people because each one of you that is listening to me tonight has a way of helping them." Imagine that. FDR's effort to help Americans deal with their own fear of an exploding fascist threat began with empathy for the war's victims, for the homeless and the asylum seekers. He reminded a frightened nation that we each have some power to act decently. He then explained 3 reasons America had ignored the growing threat for so long. There were people who in good faith believed the arguments of their fellow Americans that European threats were just none of their business. There were others who sincerely thought the 2 great oceans would protect us. And there were some who deliberately closed their eyes to the threat because they just opposed his government in all things. Assumed he was lying. In our time, Americans, I mean, just imagine. In our time, Americans sleepwalked into tyranny for the same reasons. First, because people believed those who said Republican efforts to bend laws around voting rights and gerrymandering and unlimited dark money, well, this was just politics as usual. Second, because many Americans just thought our country wasn't vulnerable to autocratic attacks. And third, because there were those who so demonized the Democratic Party they could not hear the warnings in time. Well, those illusions now lie shattered around us. Americans, are experiencing the same kind of terror that our ancestors, our forefathers, whatever they were in 1940, felt. FDR continued his talk by reviewing the ways the country was preparing to meet the challenge. He talked about modernization of the armed forces, and he shared transparently the dollar amounts the country was spending and what that money was buying in terms of weapons and military personnel. But FDR knew that weapons alone could not protect the democracy in Europe or here. Here's what he said, and I'm going to read this at length. It's important. While our Navy and airplanes and guns and our ships may be the first line of defense, it is still clear that way down at the bottom, underlying them all, giving them strength, sustenance, and power, are the spirit and morale of a free people. For that reason, we must make sure in all we do that there be no breakdown or cancellation of any of the great social gains which we have made in these past years. There is nothing in our present emergency to justify making the workers of our nation toil for longer hours. There is nothing in our present emergency to justify lowering the standards of employment. Minimum wage shouldn't be reduced. There is nothing in our present emergency to justify breaking down of old age pensions and unemployment insurance. There is nothing in our present emergency to justify a retreat from any of our social objectives, from conservation of natural resources, assistance to agriculture, housing, and help to the underprivileged. And one more point on this, our present emergency and a common sense of decency make it imperative that no group of war millionaires shall come into being in this nation as a result of these struggles. The American people will not relish the idea of any American citizen growing rich and fat in the emergency of blood and slaughter and human suffering. And last of all, this emergency demands that the consumers of America be protected so that our general cost of living be maintained at a reasonable level. Wow. In that extraordinary passage, FDR is telling Americans that the best protection against tyranny is a strong society, the kind where we care about each other and where our shared humanity matters more than an individual's ability to amass a fortune. In every particular, the work that FDR describes as strengthening our society and necessary for our defense is now under attack as part of the autocratic consolidation underway. From healthcare to pensions, from equal protection under the law to working conditions, from environmental protection to profiteering, Mr. Trump and his faction are purposefully weakening our society to make us more vulnerable. FDR closed his talk by warning of treachery, the so-called fifth column that seeks to create confusion of counsel, panic. He said that history is full of examples where, I'm quoting again, where people lose confidence in each other and therefore lose confidence in the efficacy of their united action. He warned Americans in 1940 that new forces are being unleashed, deliberately planned propaganda to divide and weaken us in the face of danger as other nations have been weakened before. These dividing forces I do not hesitate to call undiluted poison. Our moral and mental defenses must be raised up as never before against those who would cast a smokescreen across our vision. That was then. In our time, folks, those campaigns are far more sophisticated, dangerous, and effective. Hate and division are stoked as a matter of political strategy. And Republicans have been doing it since the Nixon years. I wrote about that. You can find that on my Substack. Our moral and mental defenses, as FDR said, are fogged by a constant barrage of propaganda. So let me go back to where FDR began that speech. and why he began where he did, with compassion and appeal to the best in each of us, and a reminder that we are not helpless and can still do good. Because, my friends, just maybe, if we keep our best selves, we keep our democracy too. All right, I have a great show for you. We're going to take a break, and we'll bunch when we come back.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. The Philadelphia Inquirer's national columnist Will Bunch is back. He has been writing important and just beautiful stuff lately. Will, welcome.
Hey, Edwin. Hey, how you doing? Thanks a lot.
No, I'm glad you're out there, and I'm glad you're writing what you're writing. It's just, there's hardly any aspect of the situation we find ourselves in that doesn't really call out for a journalist's attention. I mean, I don't even know anymore where to start, but maybe let's start with the gerrymandering effort in Texas, because I like what you had to say about that.
Yeah, well, the piece I wrote that came out a couple days ago, what I was trying to do with that, it is journalism, I guess, but it was really kind of more of an analysis than reporting. But the analysis I wanted to make and wanted to point out is, gerrymandering has been a problem for a long time, and political junkies know this and one thing about the crisis in Texas right now is, for those of us who've been around for a while, it's an echo of an almost identical crisis that occurred in 2003. Back in the bad old days of George W. Bush and Karl Rove, where Texas attempted the circumstances were somewhat different, but Texas attempted a mid-decade redistricting, and Democrats left the state, and there were threats to arrest them, and ultimately Democrats, for one reason or another, were only able to hold out for so long. And the other bad thing about that case was it did go to the Supreme Court because it was challenged, and the Supreme Court basically said it's okay to redraw the maps in mid-decade, which I don't quite understand that, because the Constitution is pretty clear that this is supposed to be a once-a-decade process. But what's different this time is the clear linkage from the White House to making this political in terms of the number of seats that they feel like they need to gain, and the fact that they're clearly looking at it, because honestly, given the way the polls are looking right now, a gain of 5 seats will help the Republicans, but it might not be enough to stop the Democrats from taking over the House. Even with the Democrats' brand being kind of unpopular, but that's how unpopular the Republican brand is right now. So they're looking at Indiana, they're looking at Florida, and the other thing, and I think the way this story's played out for a lot of people is, after it was clear what was going on in Texas, you saw something you had not seen before, which is Democrats fighting back. Because, Democrats have always had this complicated relationship with gerrymandering. It's like, because, theoretically, they're against it, as they should be, because it's a horrible practice. But, and so during calmer moments when they've had a chance in some of these blue states, they've been able to enact less partisan redistricting, right?
Yeah.
But now it's like if they don't respond with the same kind of, let's be honest, bad gerrymandering, but in blue states to help Democrats and pick up Democratic seats, if they don't, that's why people keep using the phrase "going nuclear" to describe this thing, because it's like a war. It's like a war. It's like a civil war. It's like, well, we're being invaded basically by what's happening in Texas, and we have to fight back. And the thing is, if this plays out the way it looks right now, and who knows, and unfortunately for the Democrats, there's really a lot of hurdles in some of these states they would need to overcome to do this. But if this does happen, if 5 or 10 states on the Republican side and are matched by 5 or 10 states on the Democratic side doing this extreme gerrymandering, I mean, what it's going to mean is it's going to mean campaigns aren't going to matter. In fact, it means that the computer, which nowadays, let's be honest, it's probably AI, right? AI-driven computers are going to be, can quickly and skillfully draw up maps to guarantee which party will win which seats. And elections will be decided by a computer, whichever side can do the most and the best. Gerrymandering is going to win, and Congress is going to be nullified, basically, when that happens.
Well, we got to unpack a few things here. So let's start with the once a decade. You're right. The Supreme Court has said it's legal. I think that was on the question of could it only be done once a decade. There's another argument, equal protection argument that can be made because the data isn't new. It's outdated. You're drawing maps based on old data. And I think people can talk about being disenfranchised. But the bigger point that you're making, which is sort of the question, should Democrats match this gerrymandering with gerrymandering, even though it is plainly anti-democratic, small d, it plainly disenfranchises voters. It is antithetical to the workings of our democracy. And I have I sit right under Wisconsin, one of the worst gerrymanders ever that we worked so hard to break. And Michigan, which broke its gerrymander, and Ohio, which has not yet broken its gerrymander. All these Great Lakes states are in this huge fight against gerrymandering and have been for a decade, more than a decade.
Yeah, it happened in my state of Pennsylvania too. Supreme Court back in the 2010s. Yeah.
There's no question that gerrymandering is terrible for the democracy. But I don't have one iota of an issue with radical gerrymandering in this moment when facing the threat to the entire democracy. We can get rid of gerrymandering if we win. We can get rid of dark money if we win. We can't do any of it if we lose. And the current administration is a consolidating autocracy that threatens every bit of America. And so I have no problem crossing that bridge. The bridge I won't cross is inventing facts, lying, doing the things that can't save our country but can only lead us further down this path of nonsense. We have to. But before you came on, I was reading a speech of FDR's, one of his fireside chats that he gave after France fell in 1940. And he talked about how important building our societies, how this emergency shouldn't undo all the work that he had spent 10 years doing already, because we can fight for our democracy if we bring everybody along as opposed to divide and conquer and make everybody afraid. So it's a terrible moment. We're in this fight, but Illinois can gerrymander more. We can get more seats here. California, just so we're clear what it would mean in California, Donald Trump got, I think the second biggest vote total he got in any state, except Texas, was California. There are a lot of Republicans in California. They will all be disenfranchised by gerrymandering. Yeah. And my view about that is Governor Newsom should say to them, sorry, folks, I am sorry you are being told you're not a citizen and your votes don't count. If you have anything to say about it, you go see Donald Trump and and Greg Abbott. Yeah, I mean, look, it's interesting you made a World War II analogy because I was thinking kind of the same thing. It is kind of like a World War II of
being forced to do something that goes against every instinct you have, right? Getting involved in the European war, sending troops, knowing some of them aren't going to come home. Luckily, this isn't that, but yeah. I don't know if I made clear in my monologue a minute ago, and also honestly in the column, I might have made it a little bit clearer too, based on some of the responses I got on social media. But yeah, look, if this Texas thing cannot be stopped one way or the other, which if I had to bet, it is very hard to stop this, especially when the courts are against you. And so if this Texas thing can't be stopped, yeah, I'm totally on board, and then to the point that
I mean, we have the same issue with
we're doing this. It's got to be done. It's a war, but it's also, I was going to say, it's funny, and I thought about doing a little riff on this in the column, but it was getting long enough. But the point you make about dark money, I thought about that a lot, because dark money is kind of in some ways the predecessor to this, in the sense that it's something that Republicans wanted and started, and Democrats' position basically, just like on gerrymandering, was, well, we don't really support dark money, but we can't win elections with one hand behind our back, and so the only way we can respond is with our own dark money, or our own super PACs and whatever. And the thing is, I mean, my opinion has been, the ultimate impact of doing it that way has been a disaster, because not only has it made, I mean, it hasn't stopped the Republicans from doing their thing, but I feel like it's also made the Democrats less responsive in some ways. We
came very close, Will. We came very close to making it illegal, despite the Supreme Court. Early in Biden's term, we couldn't break the filibuster. We had Manchin and Sinema who wouldn't let us break the filibuster, but
the filibuster,
and all of the Republicans stopped it. We came very close, and if we win, we will stop it. I mean, what I want to say at the very outset of this terrible war about gerrymandering is, I will not put up with anyone who says to me in 2 years, "Oh, both sides are doing it. This is both sides. This is just politics as usual." BS. Just like dark money comes from one side, and the other is trying to make it illegal, but you can't make it illegal if you don't win.
Yeah, I mean, there has never been a case of there's never been a case of Democrats trying to do a mid-decade gerrymandering, redrawing the maps.
No, not like this. No.
Except that the only thing that's mildly comparable, but I would say is not comparable, is that there have been some suits under the Voting Rights Act, which is a whole other can of worms related to this. But there, the one in Alabama and some others where it's taken a while to get through the courts, and the courts have said, yes, the maps weren't fair because of the Voting Rights Act. You need to change that. So
there's no more voting rights act,
I mean, you've had that. Yeah. You've had things where that wended through the courts, but you've never had like a Democratic governor, at least before this. You've never had a Democratic governor calling a special session like they've done in Texas twice now. I mean, clearly, authors like David Daley have done a great job over the years documenting how, when you go back to 2010, was kind of the perfect storm where the Democrats had that huge wave election 2 years into Obama and picked up so many seats. And really aggressively,
the Republicans.
Republicans. And they really aggressively redrew the maps after the 2010 census, and it wasn't. I don't want to say it was. Only political nerds were following it back then. And the public wasn't paying attention, and they got away with these extreme gerrymanders, and it really shaped the politics of this country for that entire decade, the 2010s. So yes, this just like dark money. This is basically Republican sin. When you say the Democrats do it, it's because what's the choice? When the only thing I would say to the Democrats, and I think they are doing this to some degree, and they need to do it perhaps more to some extent, is they just really need to make it clear why they're doing this, and that they're not doing this because they agree that gerrymandering is a good thing, or that they're taking pleasure in doing this. They should make it clear that their position is we desperately need to win these elections because that's the only way in the long run that we can stop gerrymandering, or that we can, or to your point, that we can stop dark. Yeah, and stop dark money. But they need to, I wouldn't necessarily call it a contract with America, but they need to make it very explicit that that's what the plan is, that we're going to do whatever it takes to win this election, or these next two, 26 and 28, win these next elections, because that's the only way we can implement a plan to save democracy, and be clear what that plan is, right?
I agree.
And people know.
And there are a lot of good ideas out there. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're starting to see this. Let me change the subject a little. This is the gerrymandering part of the conversation that is appalling. I now want to shift over to something. You wrote a book about colleges. It was a good book. We talked about it, right? Yeah. And you went to Brown University, So
yes, one of the capitulators. Yeah, and I did. So I did. Yeah, I did write about it in my previous.
Let me just set that up a little bit to read for everybody some of the things that are in the deal. Because the deal means Brown will share admissions and race details with the administration. They will make sure that there are female gender assigned at birth locker rooms so that women and trans women are kept separate. The school will accept and implement Trump's executive order on gender ideology and on keeping men out of women's sports, as if his executive orders are law. The school will provide gender segregated opportunities in housing and more. It will increase partnerships with Israeli scholars and will engage in research and education about Israel. The school will not retaliate against anyone complaining that they aren't fully in compliance. Brown and the government together will choose a third party, and then Brown will pay that third party to assess the climate for Jewish students, including assessing all of the social media they can get their hands on around campus. And the school will then propose responses to that assessment, which the government must approve, or Brown will be deemed out of compliance with the agreement. Brown agrees to end all forms of affirmative action. Brown may not consider race in any way in admissions, including in personal essays where people talk about their experience. And the school will provide government data on admissions by race, color, GPA, standardized tests, so the government can hunt for students they think shouldn't be admitted. Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, and yet, it's been portrayed by them as, we didn't really give up that much. And, and when you read it, it's a lot. And, it's like.
That's why I read it.
Right. Yeah. Each one of those individual things is like, well, if it was just one, if they just agreed to one or two of those things, it'd be like, maybe they had to give up something. And, when you put all those things together, it's really kind of a major sacrifice of academic freedom. And, academic freedom, it's like our freedom as citizens, it's a little bit like the Martin Luther King line about, injustice against anyone, anywhere, is an injustice everywhere, academic freedom, it's the same thing. It's like, once you surrender anything on the academic freedom front, you're really not free. I mean, that's my opinion. You can't say, oh, well, look at the other 80% of academic freedom they preserved or whatever. No, it doesn't work that way. And I understand. I heard from some people, including one or two people who I respect in academia who are like, the flip side of this, it's like a kidnapping, it's like, in a kidnapping when you do whatever you can, including paying ransom to criminals to get your kid back. It's like the research that they're doing on, curing cancer and treating different diseases, and, the heartbreak of having to end these research projects and lay people off and, kill this research that, in order to preserve it, that they were willing to make this deal. And it is heartbreaking. It is, they're being extorted basically. But there's also the opinion that's like that we don't pay ransom or we don't pay extortionists or whatever. Yep. But they agreed to pay an extortionist. And these are actually fairly significant things in every way. Especially, I don't want to say especially, we're basically talking about three areas in particular that they really focused, right, which is race when it comes to areas like admissions, or just admissions in general, the whole transgender thing, in which, and then, anti-Semitism or alleged anti-Semitism on campus. And, the admissions thing is horrible. That's a huge loss of freedom because, having the government look over its shoulder, and when the government's interest is clearly in, ending things that made the student body more diverse, wiping out the kind of things that allowed Brown to at least try, like most universities, Brown could have done a lot better before this in the diversity front. But what it has done or is doing, has been doing in terms of trying to look at somebody who comes from a very low income school district and maybe doesn't have the best top SAT score for because they were in a horrible school district for 12 years, but to look at things like their essay or things like and as you said, that was one of the rules you read. They can't even take the essay into consideration. It's just they just wanted to be wrote SAT scores in an age where we all know that affluent kids are getting SAT prep and all this other stuff.
I think it's worse. I think it's worse, Will, because they can read an essay. They can read an essay that said, "I am so proud. Dad went to Brown, and this long family tradition of Brown means a great deal to me and my family." And they can read that, and they can score that, and they can say, "We like kids who care about our university that way." But if somebody says, "You know what, I was one of 4 black kids in my high school, and I got the best grades in my school, and I got the best SATs in my school, in part because I worked so hard to overcome the extra challenges I faced because of race," they can't consider that.
Yeah, it's absurd. And honestly, they should, like I said, they should have been doing more to consider that. So that's horrible. Accepting the government's definitions and rules around the transgender community when it's clear that the government is discriminatory against the transgender community. Is essentially an embrace. It's essentially embrace. Yeah.
They've also lost their freedom to decide what they teach about, because they agreed that they will engage in research and education about Israel. So that's the government telling them what to teach and what to research.
Yeah.
And that is okay. So two down. We've covered.
Any research around Palestine is probably not going to pass muster. I don't care what they say about this third-party monitor. It's going to obviously be restrictive in terms of what people can talk about. Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about gerrymandering. We've talked about the attack on higher ed and basically destroying the freedom to be an alternative source of truth. How about one more? Because, you lived in a gerrymandered state, you went to Brown, and it turns out you're also a journalist. And so surely the First Amendment still protects journalism, and we can count on strong reporting finding its way to American people. Or has Trump managed to corrupt journalism too? Because CBS News has agreed to put in its newsroom a monitor, a government monitor, to say what they can and can't report on.
Right. Which is just appalling. And, I mean, people were, I actually ended up writing 2 columns about CBS because I wrote a column initially when Stephen Colbert was let go. And, as people have pointed out, it is true that culturally late night television isn't what it used to be, and it's suffering in the TikTok era. I understand all of that, although it's weird that if that's the case, why is the highest rated one of all of these hosts, why is he the one getting canceled first if it's not political? But anyway, I went back and wrote a second column because then the other details of this arrangement started coming out, including the monitor, and plus I feel like not enough tension. I mean, and again, I understand, I guess, because it's a little speculative at this point, but it's kind of informed speculation that this Ellison family, that Larry Ellison and his son, who bought CBS and Paramount, it's widely believed that they're the front runners to buy TikTok in this corrupted deal, where Trump is, bending the law to try and pressure how this sale of, to force this sale of TikTok, but to make sure it goes down his way to somebody who's going to be pro-Trump, But so you could have this synergy between a corrupted CBS with its monitor to make sure it's being fair to Trump, entrenched in the newsroom, and they're also going to be controlling the algorithms of TikTok, which as time goes by keeps becoming more and more important metric of how millions of people in this country get their information, get their news. So it's an alarming situation, and it's only part. There was the group Reporters Without Borders did an excellent essay about 6 weeks ago, looking at Trump's basically co-option, takeover of the media, and all the different elements, and he's really touching all the bases. And in fact, I'm not 100% decided yet, but I'm writing a new column tomorrow, and it might be on another related aspect of this, which is increasing violence against journalism, especially the journalists who try to cover protests.
Journalists, judges. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Well, what's been happening in Los Angeles is incredible, and in particular, and of course, the way these things go down in the middle of the night, and especially the middle of the night in the Pacific time zone or whatever, they kind of get lost. But and also it's not just the Trump government; it's the LAPD, whose members are certainly on board with this kind of new authoritarian direction. But the LAPD is just wailing on these journalists trying to cover, because they're still not huge, in the dozens maybe, or 100 people are going out on these protest marches against ICE. And the LAPD is wailing on these journalists trying to document what's happening, and people are getting bloodied up, people are getting arrested, and it's another way because the thing is, the big institutions, CBS or the Washington Post, they can control these because these organizations now are led by these billionaires who either are pro-Trump to begin with in some cases, or if they're not, they need almost all of them are involved in various mergers and business deals that need to get approved the FCC or by some other agency. So that's how they can kind of control the large mainstream media. But you still have independent journalists out there and people, and these people, my point is these independent folks who are out there in the streets who aren't gettable the other way, they're just beating the daylights out of them.
Yeah. So Will, it's very
depressing. Yeah.
We've covered that they're trying to cancel elections by gerrymandering so they don't matter. They have attacked education. They have attacked journalism. They're consolidating power and sending out their ICE guys to do all kinds of things. What are they doing with the power that they have worked so hard to accumulate? They're changing the flow of the Ohio River so J.D. Vance can have an easy field trip. They're destroying satellites that measure climate change because the oil companies want them to. They're imposing across the board import taxes on ordinary Americans while cutting taxes for billionaires. And of course, they're inventing daily scandals and fears so they can hide from their complicity in the Jeffrey Epstein crime business. And I guess with all of that we've talked about, depressing as is, what if I said to you, all right, quiz time, Will, on a scale of 1 to fascist, where is America right now?
I mean, it's pretty fascist. I mean, I guess because we're only 6 months into Trump, he hasn't consolidated everything yet. I mean, when I say pretty, I guess, we're not 100%. We're not totalitarian. I mean, people can still go out to events like No Kings and protest. I can still write my column, criticize the administration. I guess I'm kind of in a weird sweet spot between I'm not in a.
You don't work for the Washington Post.
Yeah, I'm not in the Washington Post, and I'm not out in the streets for them to beat me up. So far I've been protected, but how long are these things going to last? But I think I've seen people make this point. I think it's a great point. Is because they haven't fully consolidated their power. Because like they haven't gone full bore, although they did it in L.A. sort of, but they haven't really gone full bore, and calling out troops to put down protests or that sort of thing. It's like the time now, the protest, the time to try and fight back is now, when there are still some pathways to do that. Because if you don't, these pathways are going to be closed up. So we're not at 100% fascism. We're not at totalitarianism. That's one word I've used probably every other word about dictatorships and tyranny and all those other words, but one word I haven't used is totalitarianism, because we do and part of that I think is I've never been a big believer in American exceptionalism, but I do feel like some of our traditions of free speech and a free press are pretty deeply embedded, and you can't just get rid of them overnight, and which is a good thing. And most Americans still believe in democracy and things that go with it. It's been somewhat heartening to see that the majority of the public is revolted by what's going on with ICE, because I think that after Trump won the election in November, I think there was some sense of, wow, the people really want this mass deportation thing. And, I think maybe back in the fall, in the very abstract, you had a majority of people saying they supported this. But once it became a reality and people saw that it was their neighbors or people from their church or, whatever, who were being deported, you've seen this big swing in public opinion. And also, I think people on the left who were getting kind of wobbly about immigration maybe during the Biden years are back being very supportive of immigrants and immigrant rights, which is great. So,
but public opinion, as clear as it is on this, has not stopped the Trump administration from offering bounties to hire up as many incompetent people as they can give a gun to and mask them up and send them out on our streets. They're rapidly doing everything they can, and they don't care about public opinion.
Which is why these things are tied together. But, which brings us back to the whole very start of the conversation, because, gerrymandering is ultimately what gerrymandering is ultimately about is it's a way to nullify public opinion, right? It doesn't, my administration, if you take a poll, my administration is increasingly unpopular. But if you rig the district maps, it's not going to matter. That we can move.
Absolutely. Then the legislators, they owe their allegiance not to the voters, but to the map makers and the funders.
Yeah, and we've already seen this. I mean, there's a number of states across the country where, in a presidential election, they'll vote, 55% Democratic, but then you look at their legislature and it's 60% Republican. You mentioned Wisconsin earlier. That was, I think, one of the more famous examples, right, of a state that was 2016 aside and 2024 aside, but in other presidential elections, they were going Democratic, and yet you had almost a supermajority among Republicans, and it was all because of gerrymandering. So.
Which we only broke by getting the Wisconsin Supreme Court to follow the law, because John Roberts has said gerrymandering is perfectly legal. Oh, we don't like it, but there's nothing we can do about it. Throw our hands up, right? Just like, maybe the 14th Amendment says birthright citizenship's a real thing, but there's nothing we can do right now. We can't do injunctions or anything to stop President Trump from saying it's not and acting as if it's not, and we'll consider whether or not he's right or wrong, after his term is over or whatever they said. But there's nothing they can do. Are helpless.
Yeah, and now the Supreme Court is signaling that they're going to look at the Voting Rights Act, the rest of the Voting Rights Act, the part they hadn't gutted already, and I think we have a good sense of how that's going to go. And when they overturn all the rest of the Voting Rights Act, that will give a number of southern states an excuse to redraw their maps, they'll say, well, we're doing it. They'll say we're doing it mid-decade because the Supreme Court changed the law, and so we have to we need to reflect that, and it's a grim situation when you've got so many institutions. I mentioned that I think in my last column. It's like you've already got CBS and other big news orgs, Brown, Columbia, and all these other big universities. The Supreme Court's been bought off for the last 15 or 20 years. One by one, they're picking. We talk. A lot of us. You and I certainly, and some of the people listening came of age during Watergate, and in a Watergate, all of those institutions played a key role in ending the Nixon regime. The press,
because they protected the democracy
Court,
then.
Congress.
Because they protected the democracy then, Will. They did. They protected the democracy then. And because of that, the Republicans have spent every waking hour since then during destroying those institutions so they wouldn't be there to protect it this time.
Yeah,
that's what they did.
Exactly.
And we sleepwalked right into it. And now we have a very tough fight on our hands. But you and I are out of time. So we're just going to have to keep doing this fight in our own way. Thank you, Will, as always. And tell people how they can find your stuff. Great stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm at the Philadelphia Inquirer, inquirer.com. Probably the best entryway, though, is sign up for my newsletter. They actually gosh, they changed it. Google sign up for the Will Bunch newsletter because they changed the link a little while ago, and I was to something longer that I can't remember. But it takes 5 minutes to sign up with your email address, and then so that way every Tuesday you'll get my long newsletter in an email, and it will also give you links to my other columns or get you teed up to read the other column or two that I write every week. So and then you can keep in touch with what I'm writing. So that would be which would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I urge everybody. Will is a terrific writer and a patriot in a time when we need him. Thank you, Will. Really, really appreciate it.
Oh, Edwin, it's great talking to you always, and thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
We're going to take a break. You bet. Break for the news, and I will be back with some folks from Texas when we come back.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, welcome back. A little after 2 o'clock here in the upper Midwest. Representative Trey Martinez-Fisher represents the 12th legislative district in the Texas State House. That's San Antonio and part of the beautiful Texas Hill Country. Right now, Trey is representing his constituents by spending time up here in the Great Lakes. He and his Democratic colleagues are doing exactly what we teach those who would fight tyranny to do. They are not obeying. These Texans are truth tellers, and what they are telling us is that democracy is bigger than the rule-bending cheaters, Donald Trump and Texas Governor Abbott. Representative Fisher, thank you for joining me.
Edwin, thank you for having me on this show. This message is so important.
Yeah. So before we get to it, how do you like Chicago?
Hey, I tell you what, this is a great place to be. I was on your show earlier in the week, and I just said if anybody ever complained about Governor Pritzker, just come with me to Texas for a couple of weeks so that you realize what you have, because it is a really poor state of affairs in Texas.
The politics are terrible down there, but the city itself in the summer shows up pretty well. I hope you're comfortable and enjoying the time, as miserable as the politics is, that you get out and have a chance to enjoy some of the city.
Yes, Edwin, it's on my list. I mean, we're under increased security, and we have to do a little bit more planning, but it is a beautiful town. Everybody I run into is always very nice and welcoming.
You know, just as my city, as you say, has happily adopted your delegation, I want you to be sure, and I want you to, bring back to the folks you represent, they should know this, that in this fight, we are all Texans now. It's like when the whole country adopted New York City after the Twin Towers came down. Americans everywhere want to support you and Texans as your cruel governor tries to make voting irrelevant in that state.
It's so refreshing to hear you say that, and that's what I've been saying from day one. This is no longer the Apollo 13 tagline of Houston, we have a problem. This is America, we have a problem. This democracy is being stolen right before our very eyes. And all we're doing in Texas is we took a page from one of your fellow Illinoisans, Abraham Lincoln. He broke quorum a long time ago in the Illinois Assembly. He jumped out of a window. That's right. Yeah. Well, we got on a plane. He got out of a window. We got on a plane, right?
Yeah,
but we go ahead.
No, I'm glad you mentioned him. We got a lot of examples to follow in Abe Lincoln, and that was a pretty great one. Yeah.
It was indeed. I mean, but we're waking up this country. That's our mission. We know that the chips are stacked against us, but we can wake this country up and get a measured response, and I think that's happening.
Yeah. Hey, help people understand. I don't think people up in this part of the country know much about Texas. I don't think they understand, for example, how many Democrats, how many independents, how many Republicans who reject MAGA and their fascist rule there really are in Texas.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Number one, this is Texas 101. We are not a Republican state, we're a non-voting state. We have the largest African-American population in the country. We have the second largest Latino population in the country. We are a majority minority state when you combine African Americans, Latinos, and Asians. But we are governed by very extreme Republicans that have perfected the art of stacking, packing, and cracking communities of color so that they will never have a voice. So, hey, this is a big sports town in Chicago. I happen to like the Bears as well. And, you know, why would the Chicago Bears ever take the field if they knew the game had been engineered for them to lose? Who would want to play that game? That's what they're doing here in Congress. They are with mathematical precision determining political outcomes before there's a single vote cast. And that's what Donald Trump wants. He is doing lousy right now in the polls. The midterms are going to be a wreck, and the U.S. House of Representatives has a really good chance of going back to the Democrats. So Trump picked up the phone, called Greg Abbott, and said, my friend, I need you to bend the knee and draw me 5 Republican congressional districts right now. And Greg Abbott said, does the month of July work for you for me to do that? And that's where we are, and that is the state of affairs.
Yep, and Indiana, right around the corner, they're doing the same thing. So for all the reasons that you have said, gerrymandering disenfranchises people. It's a crime against democracy, and yet I think I would make no apologies saying to all those Republicans in Illinois, you're about to be disenfranchised, and it's a terrible thing. We are going to make it so that your votes don't matter in our state. And if you don't like it, go talk to Governor Abbott and go talk to Donald Trump, because we will not keep your votes in order to disarm.
What Republicans are doing today is, frankly, an insult to gerrymandering. Gerrymandering in the old days was, well, we're going to exclude this neighborhood because I have a rival over there, or I'm not in good standing with that local official. I don't want him to run against me, so we'll draw them out. That's gerrymandering. This is extreme gerrymandering. This is, we're just going to, the hell with the voters. We know better. These politicians will pick the voters instead of the other way around. This isn't about a fair and square election anymore. This is about engineering outcomes. And just think about how much technology you have on your smartphone right now and all the things you can do that you could never have done before in the 1980s. Well, when it comes to voting and drawing districts, the technology has moved in incredible speed. They know everything about you. Yep. They know everything about you.
Yep, it's perfect. So and the outcomes for people who live in radically gerrymandered states are terrible because their elected representatives don't work for them anymore. They work for the map makers and they work for the money, the contributors. They have no stake in the voters anymore. And that means that the democracy isn't. It's just not a thing. It's a decoration on top of something else. And that we can't go there.
100%. And that's where we are. And that's why folks in Illinois and the Midwest and throughout this country, they're picking this up. This is one of the most talked about issues in the country this week. And I know, California made a big announcement that they told Donald Trump, if you want to have a race to the bottom, we'll see you at the finish line. Their assembly is going to work to offset gains in Texas. Governor Pritzker said there are no rules going forward now. Donald Trump has thrown the rules out, and we all have to do what we need to do. I'm inspired to hear the voices in New York, Governor Hochul saying the same thing, state of Maryland saying the same thing. This is not the fight we want. This is the fight that we're going to finish. Because, look, this president is not the commander-in-chief anymore. He is what I've been calling the commander-in-cheat. He is just cheating his way to the 2026 election. And every time you say that on your show, I want you to think about me.
Yep, very good. Hey, we've seen all these maps of America that have a lot of red, right, and a little bit of blue. Well, a lot of that red is, sparsely populated land. It turns out that when you have congressional districts in blue states, there are a lot of congressmen. So you know what? You want to play this game? This actually plays to the favor of Democrats. You want to radically gerrymander? Illinois, New York, and California. Texas isn't going to be able to make up for all of that. To throw in Pennsylvania, you know what? Florida won't make up for that. And they're already gerrymandered, so they can only pick up a few. Like, you want to fight this fight, you will lose this fight, and you should.
Right, and you're exactly right. And there's only so much they can do in Texas. I mean, for all your listeners out there, San Antonio is a Democratic city. We're the sixth largest city in the country. Dallas is a Democratic city. Houston is a Democratic city. Austin's a Democratic city. The big 10 cities in the state are all Democratic except for one. The population, the demography is in our favor, but it's these folks that are in charge, and they're using this junk science to keep us, sequestered and to keep us inferior and not being able to compete and win.
Well, this is it. They've picked this fight. This is everything's on the line with these guys. They want to take it all. And so we're either going to fold our tents and say this was a nice experiment, or we're going to win. And when we win, then we have to make some reforms so they can't ever do it again. And some tough ones. Yeah.
It is tough. It's a circumstance we're in. Like I said, I mean, we're a part-time legislature. We just worked from session from January to June. I was very comfortable getting back home, being a civilian, making up all my honeydews that I missed for 6 months, catching up with my daughters, making sure I still had a law license because I'd been gone for a long time. And just when I settled into my normal routine, we got this salvo. And here's the other part that doesn't pencil. The Trump Justice Department is started all this because they said Texas used race when they made these 5 congressional districts, and that was unconstitutional. The problem with that is these districts that they're attacking were drawn by Republicans, and those Republicans had testified under oath in a federal court, not before one federal judge, but before a panel of 3 judges, and said that these maps were legal and constitutional and had nothing to do with race. So my question right away is who's lying? Who's lying?
Yeah.
Are the Republicans in the courtroom lying that say these seats are race blind, or is it the Trump DOJ? Now, bear in mind the seats that they're attacking are the seats that we're running in today. That these Republicans are still making their gains. So it's just a blatant power grab out of desperation because somebody's afraid of the 2026 election, right?
And by the way, if they gerrymander it more, I mean, this just means they take districts where they built in an 18% advantage because of the map. But in order to make more of them, they're going to, instead of having 5 with an 18% advantage, they'll have 8 with a 12% advantage. Their advantage has to go down in order to make more of them. And you might pick some of them up.
Right, and that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. And there are a lot of Republicans in the Texas delegation in Congress saying, hey, don't take those Republicans out of my neighborhood. Like, I need those people. You have some folks that say, hey, I practice a certain religious faith, and if you move my district too far into the rural areas, well, they don't like people like me. They don't respect my religion. I mean, so you don't hear when you start hearing Chip Roy and Congressman Tony Gonzalez when they get on the mountain and start saying this is a good idea, because that's not going to happen. They are very worried, and Trump's made it clear he doesn't care about the collateral damage. He wants what he wants.
I know, but they're going to be collateral damage follows them like night follows day. There's just it happens. Hey, let me change the subject a little bit. We've covered this gerrymandering stuff, but Governor Abbott is running again. I think this is going to be for a 4th term. And now look, he has made some mistakes, and he has tied his horse firmly to Donald Trump's back end. Do you think that makes him vulnerable? I mean, I know Texas hasn't had a Democratic governor since when? Since Ann Richards in the 90s, maybe? But do you have a shot at taking a governor out?
So the short answer is it's very uphill, and you're right. Ann Richards was the last Democratic governor. This governor right now has about $180 million in his campaign account. There are no contribution limits in the state of Texas. the guy is printing money. He is first and foremost concerned about surviving a Republican primary, which is a big MAGA audience, right? So the more extreme, the better in his view. Beto O'Rourke closed the gap on Ted Cruz back in 2018 by about 3 points. And at a presidential level, Joe Biden lost the state by 5.5 points in 2020. And so, look, we've got some work to do. This is still either a 5 to 9 point deficit for Democrats to make up. But it's engaging people who are not voting, and this government has perfected the idea of keeping people struggling with not getting a good education, not getting any health care, don't care about protecting kids in schools from mass violence. They don't even care about protecting children who are at a camp who drowned in a record flood. They are so tone deaf on this thing that folks end up seeing government as the enemy, and they don't get too excited about rushing to the voting booth to vote for a government that's done nothing for them. And I hate to say that, and I hate to sound so cynical, but there's a lot of apathy in the state because a very good example. I don't mean to hog the time here. This governor turned down $440 million from the federal government to feed children over the summer because they get their meals when they're in school, and when they're not in school, there's no place to go. So the federal government, near unanimous in Congress, Republicans, Democrats, near unanimous, they voted for this program. Texas has to put in about $40 million to stand up the program, and they get $440 million back. This governor said no. That's how awful he is.
Yeah, it's cruel. But I went back and I looked at a whole bunch of FDR's speeches to try and understand the threat that America faced when we faced the fascist threat in World War II. And his insight was that the democracy works best if we continue to build for the people who are here. So invest in Social Security, invest in health insurance, invest in minimum wages and workplace conditions. And he said if those go away, people won't care and fascism will grow in America. So in part, your governor's decision to impoverish people, to make their lives more difficult, absolutely means those people will not be interested in the kind of activities that you need in a democracy. They won't feel like they have any agency or the power to speak up. And it's going out to them and saying you do, and if you do, we can improve the lot of your lives. That's a challenge.
It is a challenge indeed. But look, I'm hopeful for the future. The demography of our state changes by the day. That census data that I gave you that gives us, we had 6 new seats in Congress in the last 20 years. 90% of that population that created those new seats were minority. 50% of that population was Latino alone. These children that are matriculating, every 12th grader sitting in a high school classroom, they may not know they're Democrats, but they know they care about having a good education, affording college, loving people without judgment. They do believe in all of the values. They want to have control over their bodies. They have our values. And if we can get them to engage, Texas is going to change, and you and I are going to be hanging out at the presidential conventions.
Do the Democrats able to run people in every district in Texas? I know that's been a problem around the country. And some, parties have worked really hard to do this. How is that gap in Texas?
Well, we have 150 House districts, 31 Senate districts, and 38 congressional districts. We can probably field candidates in every single district, but we also need to give them resources. And so, like everybody else, we prioritize. But sure, we have the bandwidth to. Yeah,
that's good. I mean, we can't win people's votes if we don't ask for their votes. So it starts
you got to show up.
You got to show up, and it's hard to ask people to run in elections where they can't win. But it starts with running in a seat you can't win and making the case. And so I'm glad you're doing that. I am. It's tough to do. Wow, it's tough to do.
Well, I just appreciate and I'm grateful to have your platform to speak our piece. A lot of people don't know what we're doing and they wake up scratching their head. And when we can have this conversation, I think people recognize that this is the side of history you want to be on.
So I love your state. I don't love its politics, but I think the people and the places stay with you in Texas. I'm from most of my Great Lakes audience, as I said about the politics, doesn't know much about the state. What do you love about Texas?
I love the people. I love the history. Yeah. I'm from the city of San Antonio. We have missions that were built, hundreds of years ago. We're a big state, but we're very small and we're very friendly. And so all of this type of, extremism you see, that is not San Antonio, Dallas, or Houston, or Austin. That is a fading soundbite. But unfortunately, because of the political science, a lot of these voices are being drowned out. So Texas is a wonderful state. We are a tremendous trading partner. We are the 6th largest economy in the world. We have a wonderful relationship with Mexico, despite the rhetoric. And frankly, we've got a lot of brain power and we've got a lot of capacity in our state.
Yeah, I used to work for one of your former mayors, Henry Cisneros. He was a terrific guy.
Did you work for him at HUD?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Well, a couple of my mentors were like he took a handful of people with him from San Antonio. 2 of them were very close to me. They both passed away. Susan Rocha and Choco Mesa. Wonderful people.
Yes, wonderful people. I worked with both of them. Wonderful, wonderful people. I also worked with Andrew Cuomo, and that jury's out on that one.
Yeah, so you were in CDBG. If you work for Cuomo, you're in CDBG. So I know the agency well.
I didn't work for him. I wasn't in CDBG, but he and I butted heads a little bit, as everybody does.
Yeah, everybody does. Yeah, no. Secretary Cisneros lives in the district I represent. He votes for me, and it's always good to get his words of advice on politics because he has seen a lot.
He's a terrific guy, really terrific guy. All right, well, let me just zoom out. So Texas has got a lot going for it, and you didn't even mention the food, which is, so Texas is a great state, and people just don't understand it because, in our part of the country, they just see big red, and they just hear your governor, and they don't really get a sense of how lovely the state is, most of it. So I'm glad that you guys have a chance to come out and tell people this.
Right. No, and it's great. I mean, our local governments are very strong. They're very democratic. South Texas is a gem. We've got beautiful beaches. We've got great food. We have lots of culture. So yes, it is a place to come, and most people may have the occasion to visit because we do host a lot of conventions, especially in San Antonio. So give us a shot. Screw our governor. Think locally.
All right, Al. So thinking about just zooming out about the whole country, I've asked everybody this on the radio today, and I want to get your take too. There's a lot that's going right, and a lot of, like you, are fighting very hard. But the idea that you have to leave the state, come here, have security, the idea that judges are being, threatened with violence, on a scale of 1 to fascist, where would you say the United States is right now?
It's about 3 clicks away from fascist.
Yeah. That seems to be everybody's view, that we really need to take this seriously. And the big fight. Big fight. All right. Listen, thank you. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Thank you. I was just going to say 25 years of politics. I never imagined to get a letter that the FBI might lean in to come find me for a political fight in Texas.
Oh, on that story, I mean, the FBI has zero business. There is no felony. There's no federal offense at all and it's not illegal to leave your state in America. You are allowed to leave your state in the United States. That is just a thing. Happens every day. The idea that they would weaponize the federal police force to do this work is just one more example of why we're only 3 clicks away.
I'm 100%. I agree with that.
Yep. Trey, really, I appreciate the time you spent today. I hope that you aren't under lock and key the whole time you're here, that you get out and get a chance to enjoy this city, its food, and its people. Because, as I said, we're all Texans right now.
Thank you, my friend. Well, I have my list, and I'm hoping to enjoy that. And it's a pleasure to be on your show. And thank you for your hospitality to host me today.
You bet. Yeah, you bet. All right, everybody. That is Trey Martinez-Fisher fighting the good fight from outside the state of Texas right now. We're going to take a quick break. And when we return, the Washington Monthly's Bill Scher is going to join me.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody. Bill Scher is back. He is the politics editor of the Washington Monthly. He's been telling it like it is for a while, including, warning us all a long time ago that we'd be better off if we had a presidential primary on the Democratic side, and warning us of impending disaster, which, you know what? Disaster is here. But so is Bill, so that's the good part. Hi, Bill.
It's good to talk to you again.
I just had a conversation a little earlier today with the Philadelphia Inquirer's fabulous columnist, Will Bunch. We talked about gerrymanders. We talked about attacks on higher ed and journalism and on the abuses of power we see every day. And so I'm going to start, I usually end this, but I'm going to start this conversation by asking you what I asked Will and I asked Trey Martinez-Fisher from Texas. On a scale of 1 to fascist, where is America right now?
Well, I'm not a full fascist. That's because as abusive as the president has been, and while you see a whole lot of capitulation on a lot of fronts, I do believe that the Constitution is holding. It might be being bent severely, but I don't think it has been broken. You do see the independent judiciary act independently in key moments. You do see Democrats able to throttle a good chunk of what the Republicans would like to do legislatively. So those checks and balances, while under great strain, I think are still in place enough to say we're not at, full fascist yet.
No one has said we're at full fascist of the people I've talked to today. But they've all said we're leaning that way pretty tough. I mean, the checks and balances that were built into the Constitution have fallen. The House and Senate and the Supreme Court, at least, and the president are acting as one, not as checks and balances on each other.
Well, I mean, we do have there are cases you can point to, but there are other cases with the courts, for example. They did not say, Mr. President, you can deport whoever you like whenever you feel like it. They may have gone about it in a slow way and not as forcefully as I would have liked, but those lines were drawn. And even though Mr. Garcia, who was deported illegally to El Salvador, has brought back, and he still hasn't gotten his freedom yet. I understand that, but as a judicial matter, they said you can't keep him in El Salvador, and the president did say, fine, I'll go get him back.
So they had a 9-0 vote, which was amazing. But on all the others that they've said in this shadow docket of theirs, it may be illegal, but there's nothing we can do about it. We'll take the merits up sometime in the future. But if you think there's a method to stop it, that method is illegal, whether that's an injunction or anything else.
Well, you can go back to the Federalist Papers on this score where, Alexander Hamilton said, this is the weakest branch. The judicial branch is the weakest branch. They don't have innate enforcement power, which is why, in his argument, and everybody agrees with this, I understand, but that's why he argued it should have a lifetime appointment. That is the way to, as best possible, level the playing field so they can't, because when all three branches are co-opted, that is when freedom is in most jeopardy. That's what's in the Federalist Papers. And so you have that lifetime appointment. you have a chance. It's nothing's foolproof, nothing's perfect. I think even the Federalist Papers acknowledges it as much or implies it. But that is the way to say, you know what, Mr. President, my job is not dependent on you. So I don't have to do what you demand I do. Even though it's a very conservative Supreme Court, probably the most conservative we've had since the Dred Scott days, they do maintain a longer view than the president does. And at times they'll say, you know what, I don't have to do what you want me to do, Mr. Trump.
I'm looking for them to say that a little louder so that the rest of us can hear it.
I mean, we can't. I'm not going to raise my expectations very high here. I'm not trying to be overly sanguine about this, but in terms of are we in fascism or not? That holding is what keeps me going. And look, I think the midterms are not going to go the Republicans' way. They, it is pretty standard. I mean, the average pickup for the opposition party in the House on a midterm is 25 seats. The last time around, when Biden was president and Democrats only lost 9, that was like, wow, you only lost 9 seats. That's amazing. That's one of the best performances. And it's only going to take 3 to take back the House this time. I mean, Democrats have to really screw it up to not take back the House. And everything that Trump is doing is a classic example of presidential overreach. You see the poll numbers, the numbers going the other way. The economy is not looking like it's going to be in gangbuster shape a year from now because Trump is doing everything he can to disrupt and destabilize it. So I think it's a pretty safe bet. Democrats are going to clear the net 3-seat bar, even with all the redistricting nonsense that they're talking about. Because if an average pickup of 25, you're not going to redistrict your way to prevent that from happening. And so once Democrats are back in the House, they have subpoena power. The legislative agenda of Trump's is completely dead. This is how we get back on track.
Yeah, Senate's tougher.
Absolutely. I mean, waves happen, and I feel like these are the ingredients of a wave election. So I don't discount it, but that's a much tougher map, and it would be I would not say it's better than 50-50 odds, but I wouldn't put it at 0 either.
Right, and in no case will we have a filibuster-proof Senate. So,
of course,
listen,
not.
I love your piece about resurrecting the successes of the Biden presidency, or as you said, stop memory holing it. So talk to people about why that's important.
Well, every time, Biden gives a speech, or now Kamala Harris does an interview, she's got a book coming out soon, you immediately get all this commentary, go away. We need to turn the page. We need a fresh face. We don't want to relitigate what happened, talk of cover-up of Biden's competency. We just want to forget about all that. And I get it, and I'm not happy that Biden ran again. In retrospect, Well, I defended him for a while up until the debate. The debate was, yes. And then I was. The debate was in. Me too. And I don't believe it was a cover-up. I don't think it was a scandal. I think they kind of blinded themselves to what was going on. And so I understand not wanting to be bogged down with that. And there's a certain energy and excitement you get from a new face. I get that too. So I'm not even arguing those points. But Democrats have this tendency when it comes to their presidents to throw out the good with the bad. Even with Bill Clinton, who had 2 terms, strong economic performance, obviously the Lewinsky thing made things very complicated for Al Gore. But when he said in his acceptance speech, the election is not a reward for past performance, it was kind of dismissing the 8 years when he could have been saying, look at all these great things that we did. Forget about the tawdry stuff. We've shown our economic skills here. We have credibility on this score. And so Gore probably overcompensated there. Barack Obama had 2 terms. And even though he was succeeded by Trump, and it's he got succeeded by Trump, so everyone say, forget those 8 years. It didn't work out. So we should just start anew with a whole different strategy, and therefore you end up looking past all the things that he did accomplish, things that are we're still benefiting from today, and people like today. And it's all part of a larger narrative that Democrats could be saying now, which is time and time again, Democrats come into the White House to clean up Republican messes, and they do it, and they do it well. And Clinton did that for George W. Bush.
Couldn't agree with you more. You go further back. I mean, the Democrats ran as fast as they could away from Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter brought in Paul Volcker. Paul Volcker said to him, "I'm going to ruin your presidency because I'm going to fix inflation." And Jimmy Carter said, "It's good for the country. Do it." And
That's right.
You know what? I mean, right? Like, this is amazing when you look back at it, the accomplishments of Democrats. Yeah, God knows we make our mistakes, right? But the idea that we're going to try and build a country for the people who live here, not just the people who own here, has been consistent and effective when we've had the chance.
And I understand it was hard for Kamala Harris to run on the Biden-Harris record in October, November 2024, because people were still mad about the inflation spike that was over. But, this is all sort of part and parcel. A somewhat more vibrant president would have been better able to communicate the inflation improvement, because what happened on Biden's watch is somewhat similar to what happened on Reagan's watch in his first term. And even Reagan was not a spring chicken, but he was a more effective communicator in '84 than Biden was in '24. And he could say, "Look, things are improving. It's morning in America." Even though '84, the metrics in '84 were worse than '24, but he could sell the improvement. But I get that Harris couldn't walk in and just do that nimbly. But now we're in 2025. We have a year of Trump trashing all of that progress, purposefully jacking up prices with tariffs, firing thousands of federal employees that damage services, denying disaster relief, not just to blue areas, but to red areas of the country, basically making the government in the Grover Norquist vision of a government so shrunken you could drown it in the bathtub. And people don't want that. And you could say, look, whatever you thought about Biden-Harris, here's the good things that came out of it, which are akin to the good things Democrats have always done when they come into office. We have a track record here, and the Republicans have their track record. Compare the two. You can do that even if you're unhappy about Biden's age and all that stuff.
I agree with you. And the accomplishments are real, and you talked about it, and it would do us a lot of good to talk about them. But the other point, and I think you just raised it, is if we're not talking about it, you know what they say to politicians about journalists? You're either a source or you're a subject, right? If we don't talk about the accomplishments that we had when we were Democrats, the Republicans are going to lie and say they were all failures. Donald Trump is going to lie and say, I inherited the worst economy in the history of the world, when he inherited the strongest economy on the planet and only took 6 months to wreck it.
I would add to that, which is, anybody can run for office and say, I got a great idea. I'm going to propose this, and you're going to have more money in your pocket and more services. It's going to be wonderful. And anyone could sketch that on a one-pager and say, look, everything's going to be perfect when I come into office. Prove to me you know how to do it. That is the swing voter standard. Okay, every politician comes to my neighborhood and tells me they're going to do wonderful things. Why should I believe you? And that's why the story matters. That's why the history matters. You don't want to run the past, but you need the past to give you the credibility to sell folks on the future. And so to say, look, we know how to do this. We've done this before. We did it in this term and in this term and in this term. Under Biden-Harris, we did invest in we did make healthcare more affordable. We did invest in infrastructure and clean energy. We figured out how to work across the aisle to pass a lot of these things. When people said it couldn't be done, we didn't turn everything into a political culture war, and we moved the ball forward. And I understand you didn't love it in real time, but here's the opposite. Here's what Trump did when he got in office, when he doesn't work across the aisle, turns everything into a selfish political power game, and doesn't care at all about how it affects your day-to-day life and your cost of living. That's the contrast.
Yeah. I mean, Joe, decent guy. Barack, no scandals. I mean, this is an exhausting sea of scandal. I mean, let me ask you about this. How is it? Because I just don't understand it. How is it possible that $1 billion, just shy of $1 billion, gets reprogrammed, without Congress doing it, gets repurposed from modernizing our nuclear arsenal, not unimportant, to fixing up that Qatari plane so that after he's president, Donald Trump can have a fancy plane? How is that even? I mean, how isn't there a due process, something that Americans can say, wait a minute, why am I spending $1 billion of my tax money on his plane that won't, be Air Force One?
These are the questions you can dig into those questions more if you have a different
if you have control of Congress
or Senate.
Yeah.
Who have subpoena power? I mean, and they may try to duck the subpoenas and appeal stuff and whatnot, and it may be a cat and mouse game throughout it all. So if you want a chance to ferret out those kinds of questions, you need to have a Congress that's willing to actually exercise oversight authority, which this Congress clearly is not.
Yeah. Okay. You said they may try and duck those subpoenas. I'm willing to put money on that with you right now. It's a certainty. I mean, let me ask you, did, oh my God, what's his name from Ohio? He was chairman of oversight and, the pit bull. And he got subpoenaed and he never showed up. Can't believe his name's out of my head. Well, all right, doesn't matter. I mean, they will try. They will not show up for subpoenas.
Yeah. I mean,
what are you going to do? You're going to say, I'm going to refer this to Pam Bondi for legal action that you're ignoring the subpoena, and Pam Bondi will come back and sue the person who issued the subpoena.
I'm sure they'll try every trick in the book to avoid accountability. But you want a Congress doing their best to exercise oversight, and if they're going to hide, then the public knows they're hiding. I mean, just like with the Epstein files. I mean, look, I'm not someone who believes there's a giant conspiracy out there, but the fact that he won't just cough him up after saying he would obviously raises an eyebrow, and the public recognizes that. The public automatically says, well, if you're offering it when you said you were going to do it, it makes you wonder what's going on there. And so if that's the way they're going to play it.
Do you think the public knows that, going to the courts to try and get grand jury testimony was a ruse, that the government that the administration, executive branch actually has tons of information that they could release? Does the public understand that?
I mean, I can't speak to the level of detail that the average voter is in possession of, how close they're following it. But I just polling would suggest, and common sense would suggest, the average person saying, I think there's something there. You said you were going to give me files, and you're not giving them to me now, and your excuses don't make any sense.
They were sitting on my desk, as Pam Bondi said. I'm just reviewing them now.
And if it was said up front that we'll love to give you as much information as we can, but look, there are going to be some names in here of people who we don't have enough evidence committed crimes, and it's not common practice to publicize those people's names and drag their reputation through the mud if we don't have the evidence to actually prosecute. So there's going to be some redacted names here. Here you go. That would be an understandable result of all this. The problem for Trump is that his rise to power is tied to conspiracy theorizing. He cultivated a base that were prone to believing conspiracy theories, were attracted to someone who said that he was going to expose all the conspiracies, that he was so far removed from the political establishment that he would have no qualms dropping a dime on everybody. I'm going to release the 9/11 files, the JFK files, and the MLK files, and the Epstein files. So to then give these sort of standard explanations why it's not so simple to release documents, that doesn't fly with his own base, and he can't readily say that so bluntly. And it just raises more questions. If there was nothing to keep quiet about, you would just give it to him, and you're not. So even if you're not a dire conspiracy theorist, you're left wondering what's going on here.
Well, I mean, they can't possibly have handled this worse. Why was Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche going, to interview whatever her name is, Ghislaine Maxwell, the procurer, in jail? And then why did they move her to a facility that you actually are not supposed to put sex offenders in? What is that?
Trump has always been seemingly a little gentle towards her in all of his comments. I mean, he knows her. We know that. They were pals. And he likes to exercise his pardon power to help people that he knows. He has a long track record of this. And I'm sure he may well be interested in exercising that option. And he's someone who doesn't really care about, he's not going to be on the ballot again. Whatever the third term talk people like to talk about, it's not going to happen. He knows it. He does. So that's not a concern about him being on the ballot again. He doesn't really care about the future of the Republican Party. He doesn't care about who he's going to pass the torch to. This is a guy who lives in the moment on impulse all the time. So the fact that his reasoning doesn't hold water, that these things don't look bad for the party and for people who want to run, people who are running for office in 2026 in Congress or who run for president in 2028, that's not his primary concern. And you're going to get weird decisions like this because he just lives in the moment and cares about himself and his ability to do favors for friends more than anything else.
Yeah. All right. That's enough, Epstein. There's a cottage industry now. Maybe it's just a bad habit for Democrats to complain that the party doesn't have the guts to fight the Republicans. And this goes way back. I mean, I remember when Bill Clinton was running and people said he didn't have the guts. I mean, what were they going to do if they put him in a tank like they did Dukakis and made him look miserable and they didn't know how tough he was? They just said, oh, you're not tough enough for this. He was tough enough. But I think the Democrats are showing some spine. And I think you've written about this, that, they ran the Republicans out of Washington, D.C. recently, stop them from causing more mischief because they didn't want to be on the record on, oops, we're back to Epstein. But that isn't the only thing. I mean, my Senator Dick Durbin, who is stepping down, and he's, not young, but he's been on fire lately. I think we found a gene that we haven't seen in a while.
Well, look, all these debates, I've seen these debates within the Democratic Party for my entire adult life.
Yep.
There's always a divide over strategy, and it's got nothing to do with guts or courage. It's just a difference of opinion. What is going to be the most effective? And you always get a faction of people that want to go scorched earth all the time. And some people that say, I'm not sure it's going to work for us. I'm not sure it's actually going to help us at the end of the day if I reflexively attack Republicans on everything. I think we got to pick our spots. Depending on the circumstance, I might be on one side or the other depending on the situation. I never look at it as one side has a spine and the other side does, and they just have a different view on what they think is going to make political sense. And I'm often on the side of being careful and thinking about possible backlash to going too far. But, for example, I recently wrote, in terms of the spending bills that are before the Congress right now, to keep the government open past September 30th, I said the Republicans have already broken faith. They had a deal to keep the government open through September, and then they pulled this rescission nonsense. They clawed back money. And they said it's not a one-time thing. We want to do it again. We don't want Congress to have power of the purse. We want to control this stuff. And again, I'm somebody who in the Biden years said, don't assume Republicans are mistrustworthy. don't assume you can't get to 60. And to be a little boastful, I was proven correct. They did get to 60 on infrastructure. They did get to 60 on gun safety. They did get to 60 on semiconductor manufacturing. It was possible. It was to dig that out. Not that it was easy, not that it makes the Republicans heroes, but I didn't think it made sense to be overly simplistic about that analysis. So I'm just coming at this when I say today, Republicans have broken faith on spending bills. It's because they've broken faith on spending bills. It's plain as day, and I can see that and say, you know what, Democrats, you have every right to say you want a partisan appropriations process. Trump's budget director said we think the appropriations process should be less bipartisan. If that's what you want, you got it. Have fun. We're not going to sit at the table with you to discuss these bills. You can go figure it out. And if that means you got to blow up the filibuster to do it, well, that's on you. You don't seem to care about these rules. You want to do it in a partisan way. You do it. See how it works out for you. That's my recommendation in this moment right now. Now, I'm not seeing Democrats do it yet. I'm not going to yell at Jeffries or Schumer and say you're spineless because you're not listening to me. But I do think that is the logical place to go right now.
Well, and you are a student of this. You're a I don't want to say an insider because that has a bad connotation, but you know what goes on inside. So but the vast majority of Democrats in the nation who aren't insiders, who don't know anything about what's going on behind closed doors or about the strategies here, they are all saying, I'm like almost unanimously saying, don't work with these people. You can't trust them. Don't do it.
Well, look, I don't live in Washington. I'm not in the Beltway. I look at it from the outside like you do.
But you look carefully.
I do. And during the Biden years, there were people in Congress, congressional staff, telling me, literally like on Twitter, like telling me that I don't know what I was talking about, that you can't trust anything these Republicans say, they're all terrible. Look, again, I'm not saying they're heroes. I'm not saying they're wonderful, sweet, peachy guys. I'm just saying I think there is a way to find the cracks on certain issues, and it's worth trying. I mean, if I was redoing the Biden administration, like Biden kind of went hard partisan at the front end, and then kind of backtracked and went more bipartisan, in year two. I would have done it the other way. I would have said, let's see what we can get with 60 on the front end, squeeze all that low-hanging fruit out, and then when you hit the wall, then say, okay, here's what's left. Now let's go partisan. I think the tone of the administration and the dynamic of these would have been different that way.
That's interesting. But the pent-up desires on the Democratic side after years were, I think, unstoppable.
Well, and to go back to what we were saying before, and this sort of blows my mind, the Biden team really internalized this negative narrative about Barack Obama, even though they were there. They were in the administration. But this notion of Obama was too soft and too timid and too compromising, and I was like, man, you know what he racked up on his watch? He got Wall Street regulation. He got the Recovery Act. I mean, I know Obamacare was not with Republicans, but that's the only one. All this other stuff they did came with Republican votes, And they memory hold it. They just bought into this narrative. It gets kind of caught up in this social media echo chamber. Even people whose job it was to be in the administration kind of bought into that, and that changed the trajectory of the entire Biden administration. So I don't necessarily like the notion of saying, well, you're in D.C. and you're an insider, therefore you must know better, because there are plenty of people at the upper echelon of these things that don't know better.
Yeah, and there's also a whole lot of political consultant damage. Somebody's polling bad this week. Find a way to distance yourself, or let's engage in the 1990s habit of triangulation. And there are a few Democrats out there doing that right now. They want to stand out from the crowd, so they're saying, I'm not going to talk about bathrooms or whatever it is, because right, like in a time when Democrats should say, I will stand with anyone who will stand with me to fight and win back our democracy. They're saying like, oh, no, I'm the special one who's going to stand apart from the rest of us who are in this crowd. That does not do us any good.
And I think that's mushy political thinking. Again, I get that elections are won with base plus swing. You can't do it base alone. You do need swing. And I'm not going to argue with you that if I put transgender rights front and center of my campaign, is that going to win me the swing? Probably not. But does that require me to throw transgender rights under the bus to get the swing? There's no evidence of that. This is an issue.
And you lose base.
Well, exactly.
So, right, and in a game that has to be about addition, it has to be about building a bigger base, frankly, and saying, so swing folks, you know what, there's a home for you in here, building a bigger base. This is what leaders do, as opposed to, you look at some of the things the Republicans have done that I loathe, but I admire. They changed the way the country thinks about some things. They moved the window of what's possible. Now, Democrats have done that a lot, but that's not what that kind of politics is. It's a different kind of politics.
And when you're throwing chunks of your coalition under the bus, it not only loses base votes, I think it also loses swing because it looks so craven. Everybody knows you really don't really mean it. And what the average swing voter wants is evidence that you care about their issues, are going to deliver for them. Generally speaking, when it comes to the economy, if you deliver on the economy, they generally don't care about the other culture war type issues, and that's why to go full circle. That's why that past narrative is so important to say, you know what, we did care about the average American. We did deliver in ways that are tangible and that you can see the difference. I mean, maybe it's hard to appreciate in real time, but you see the difference when you have a president that doesn't care, that wants to fight culture war battles, that wants to do things that are in his self-interest and not prioritize your interest. You're seeing it in spades right now. And you can show that it does not require overcompensating on any kind of culture war type issue to do that.
Why does this conversation why is the New York mayor's race coming to mind as I listen to you?
I mean, in a way, everyone involved in that race, in my opinion, is treating it like it's a national race. And instead of really focusing on the more local issues, and I think that's as it stands, Mondami is probably going to win this thing.
I think so too, and I don't think that's bad for Democrats. In and of itself, no. I mean, who knows how that merrily goes? Even if he has like an idea that's grandiose and he can't get it done, it doesn't mean the whole city goes down in flames because it didn't happen. No, totally right. But also, it's New York. I mean, nobody is confused that New York is Nebraska. Like, they're going to do their thing, and the voters in New York are going to do their thing. And God bless them. I hope it works out for them. But, yeah.
So, Mondami is doing the most to have ideas that focus on New York. I think there's a bit of it that is trying to be like a model for everybody else. The free buses and the free grocery and the grocery stores. If in a different race with an opponent that wasn't resigning because of sexual misconduct or an incumbent that wasn't brazenly corrupt, Soros might be able to get in there and say, you know what, I got some ideas that are going to help average New Yorkers that are a little more practical. You might have more opening there. But because you have, Cuomo and Adams, caught up in these sort of national issues, talking about, the jihad stuff and Middle East stuff, and none of that is bread and butter, what's going to make the average New Yorker's life better.
Yeah, the voters. They're not the voters.
I'm not in New York right now. I'm not on the ground there, so I'm speaking. I'm sure I'm not the best guy to ask these questions, but just generally speaking, I would think it's not the best way to win that kind of race.
Yeah. All right, Bill, we've run out of time. Thank you so much. Really appreciate this. And people read the Washington Monthly, sign up follow Bill's social media. It's just, important. All right. We'll take a break for the news and talk economics when we come back.
You're looking at the big picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Hey, before I go to my next guest, I need to talk to you about the news you just heard, because we listened and the news was reported. The president says D.C. has become one of the most dangerous cities in the world. And that wasn't immediately followed by, are you kidding me? Because it's absolutely not true. D.C. is not one of the most dangerous cities in the world. It's not even close to one of the most dangerous cities in the world. So every time a news organization, a reporter, a newsreader just reports what the man says and it's a flat out lie, that's not news, that's propaganda, and we need to call it out. And forgive me, but we aired it and we shouldn't have. All right. Dean Baker, founder of the Center for Economic and Policy Research. He is a writer and author of books, of studies. He is my go-to on this show for discussions of economics, and he happily has joined us again today. Hi, Dean.
Hey, Edwin. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for making that correction. Reporters really are being irresponsible, and they just repeat lies without pointing out that they're lies.
Right? It happens every day. Every day.
Yeah, and people don't have the time. That's what the reporters, I'm not blaming the person who's a specific announcer on that, but that's what reporters are paid for. People don't have the time to investigate these things. The reporters ostensibly do. So just repeating a lie and passing it along as though it's true is outrageous.
Outrageous. Speaking of outrageous, we just had Liberation Day. We are now in a new world order.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes my breath away. So seriously, the scope of the change of economics. I mean, there are a lot of things that we didn't get right in the 1990s, for sure, when the last time the economy changed so dramatically in the world after the fall of the Soviet Union. And we had a globalization that we got partly right and partly wrong. But this is just as big a change, and it's happening with stunning speed and probably is terrible.
Probably much worse. I mean, there's literally no logic to this. I mean, people keep saying, Trump's plan. That's a lie. There's zero evidence Trump has anything resembling a plan. He says one thing one day, the opposite the next. So, again, someone who says he has a plan, what is the plan? You're making things up. Trump might say he has a plan, but there's zero evidence. So he's haphazardly put tariffs on people, put tariffs on us, I should say. And again, this is something that there is confusion about. There's no reason for the confusion. We're paying the tariffs. So Trump is going around boasting that he's imposed this huge tax on the American people. And I have no idea what's in his head. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. The tax is on us. He didn't impose the tariff on the EU, on Japan. He imposed the tax on people importing from those countries. And it's hundreds of billions of dollars. It's the largest tax increase in history. And yeah, it's going to create all sorts of distortions in the economy. It will reduce our imports. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you put a 15% tax on what we import from Europe, we'll import less. We were 50% from Brazil, so we're all going to pay more for our coffee. Probably people drink so much less coffee. I won't. I could have thankfully afford it. I'm happy for that, and I'll pay for my coffee. But, that's out of people's pockets. So it's a huge increase in people's cost of living. And again, for no logic, there's no, and again, I'll contrast this. I've criticized Biden on plenty of things he's done, but he imposed tariffs. Not all of them were perfect or right, but there was a logic. So he wanted to boost our production of semiconductors, advanced semiconductors, he put a tariff. And then also he had subsidies for building the semiconductor. Trump's taking credit for those plans now. That's what he does. But that made sense. Again, you could argue it was the right policy, but there was a logic to it. Same thing with tariffs on imported cars, on solar panels. I mean, he's trying to build up a domestic industry here. There's no logic. Trump puts a 50% tariff on steel. That's going to help our auto industry. He goes meets with a group of steel workers, and he says, I couldn't decide, 40% or 50%. Guess what, guys? I'm going to make it 50%. Well, it might be okay for them. I mean, maybe it'll mean a few more jobs in the steel industry. I'm happy to see steel workers get jobs, to be clear. But our auto industry uses steel. Our airplane industry, it's used in all sorts of other domestic manufacturing, and you're going to take away jobs there. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyhow,
Dean, I don't see how it's possible. I don't see how it's possible to onshore the manufacturing and supply chains we need in anything like the time frames that Trump is talking about. This is a wrenching change that if we wanted to do it, would take planning and time and transition work. And I expect that there will not just be higher prices, but actual shortages in the supply chain for sure, but probably shortages in consumer goods as well, just because there is no possible way to make up for this that fast.
Well, we were on the edge of seeing that big time when Trump briefly had his, I think we're 154% tariffs on goods from China. The stuff stopped coming in, and we could see it. I mean, you see the ships on the water. I don't personally see them, but actually I do on the Columbia River, so some of them go by me. But I don't see all the ships coming out of China. But it is monitored, and the number of ships leaving from China to the U.S. just collapsed. So those were goods that were going to show up in the shelves here, and they weren't going to show up. Now Trump backed down. So the traffic came back, and most of the stuff is still coming. But we don't know. I mean, Trump's still playing. He hasn't decided what the final tariffs will be with China. It's sort of humorous if there weren't so much at stake. China's President Xi is obviously, he is not impressed because at the end of the day, they don't really need the U.S. market. They don't want to lose the U.S. market. But it's sort of like if you're a restaurant, you have a guy who comes there every couple of weeks with a big party, and a lot of people come there and he leaves a good tip or something. You don't want to lose him as a customer. But if they start being obnoxious, people start drinking and they're a pain in the ass, you go, well, yeah, I wouldn't mind losing as a customer. And that's kind of Trump to China now. They don't need the U.S. market. And if Trump's going to be a jerk about it, they're just going to go fine. And we'll pay the big price for that, not China.
Yeah. We're not sure yet what he's going to do with tariffs on drugs. He's trying to get them, even though through some technicality in the law. And then there's still these things that we can't do here. Like we can't grow coffee here. I don't know what he thinks. There's going to be no domestic coffee growth. Doesn't happen, or tea or things like that. There are plenty of things that the world creates that we cannot recreate here. There's some minerals that just aren't in our ground. There's some crops that won't grow in our soil. And
again, what's the logic? I mean, it's like, why would we even want that? It's, you're in Chicago, I'm from Illinois, so Illinois should produce everything itself. Well, a lot of things people make in Illinois and they consume in Illinois, and that's great. But there's a lot of stuff you get from not just the rest of the world, but the rest of the country. And why is that a bad thing? I mean, would we Illinois?
Yes.
Yeah. So it just makes no sense. And again, for certain items, Biden's going back to his policy. There was a clear logic that we shouldn't be dependent on Taiwan for semiconductors, not just because it's foreign, but in the event we did have hostilities with China, well, that could be cut off. So I'm not, as you probably know, I'm not much of a China hawk, but I would grant that we probably don't want to be dependent on an island just off of Taiwan's coast for all our semiconductors. So that made sense. And there's cutting-edge industries.
I'm afraid this does make sense. And I'm afraid there is logic to it. And to get to it, I want to take a detour and ask you if you paid attention to Apple's Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, his recent visit to the Oval Office. He gave Trump,
I saw that.
Right? He gave him a gold, basically a gold iPhone. I mean, it was not quite that, but did you see there's a scene in The Godfather where they're in Havana and it's right before Castro takes over, and all of these American companies are sitting around the table, and they give the guy, the outgoing, strong man, a gold telephone to bribe their way into the island. Well, okay, so Tim Cook goes there and he gives this gold iPhone, and then Apple gets tariff exemptions worth billions. So I'm afraid the logic of this is I'm going to cause as much random pain as I can and see who will bribe their way out of it.
Yeah, no, I think that is the logic. And in fact, I think most economists, you hear a lot of economists jumping up and down, yelling and screaming how the tariffs are so awful and everything. That's the biggest reason why they're awful. We could adjust. I mean, I think it's stupid, but we could adjust to the 15% tariff on the EU, 15% tariff on Japan. We could adjust. It's stupid, but we could adjust to that. And I'll also add one additional point to that I don't think Trump understands, but the worst thing about that story is we don't know what the tariffs will be next year because Trump changes them on a whim, I guess, because of bribes. But that really is the worst part of the tariffs, that it just is an invitation to corruption, and we're seeing that. And again, Trump has made no bones. He's about corruption.
It's a feature, not a flaw for him. It's a feature.
Yeah. No, he doesn't even. I mean, whoever he sells his crypto coin. I mean, it's just become absurd that we had the Biden administration. I'll even give Bush credit. Bush 1 and Bush 2. They tried. They weren't my models by any means, but during their presidency, they tried to be more or less, by the books, and they generally were. After the presidency, we could talk about that, but during their presidency, they weren't taking bribes. And Trump is very openly taking bribes, one after another, and he's not hiding it. He just goes ahead and does it. And Speaker Johnson said, "Well, it's all out in the open, so it's okay." So, kind of like Trump made his famous comment, "I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and I won't lose any votes." So that's kind of what Johnson's saying. Yeah, you can take your bribes, broad daylight, and it's okay.
Dean, last week, one of your brethren economists was on this show, Rob Shapiro, who I knew from my days in the Clinton administration. He came on and he was all gloom and doom. But to start, he said that the deficit hawks, who have never been right, are finally right. And he said, this time we may find the market for debt because we've just blown the deficit so big that it'll be a whole lot more expensive to issue debt than it was before. And he worries that as a percentage of GDP, it'll shrink the economy, not help it grow. And tied with tariffs, the economy will shrink even more, and it'll become even a bigger percentage of GDP. I know you're not a deficit hawk, so I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that.
Yeah, well, a couple points. The deficit, I mean, we were just complaining a moment ago about how big the tariffs were. We actually are raising a lot of revenue from the tariffs. It's really regressive. I mean, we just gave a big tax break to Jeff Bezos and Mr. Tesla. I'm forgetting his name now.
We paid for Bezos' wedding in Venice.
Yeah, so we just gave big tax breaks
to the richest people. Private jets. Yeah.
Yeah, to the richest people in the world, but we're now imposing taxes on working class people, middle class people. Buy stuff at Walmart, they're going to pay higher prices for Trump's tariffs. So, but that does raise revenue, and we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars a year. So the deficits actually aren't going to be that high. So again, maybe the tariffs won't stay. None of us know this. Trump probably doesn't have an idea. He does. I don't think he even thinks that way. He just well, what tariff do we? Because he kind of says that. But the other part of the story, and I'm pretty sure I've said this on your show before, I think at the end of the day, as long as the U.S. has a strong economy, we don't have to worry about being able to borrow money. And for that matter, I mean, people have made the point, I've made the point, we print the money. You worry about inflation if you just start printing huge amounts. But if we have a strong economy, that's not going to happen. But the issue I worry about is we won't have a strong economy. He's doing these massive cuts to our research, so that's what I worry about. So in that case, Rob would be right that the deficit or debt will be a problem, but it's not so much that we have so much debt, it's that we don't have a strong economy.
Yeah. And the day after I spoke to him, and I said, do you think we can trust the labor statistics coming from the government? And he said, sure, a lot of people are involved in it. There are other sources. We'll know if they're lying. The day after that, Trump fires the head of the BLS for giving him bad news. And I mean, I don't know how you do your job as an economist if we don't get good stats from the government.
Yeah, this is huge. It really is huge. Now, to my knowledge, we haven't heard of anyone else being fired. We haven't heard of any procedures being changed. So for now, I'd still say I would trust. I mean, we're about to get a price report on Tuesday. Do I think that will be right? Well, for now, I do. Maybe we'll see something on Tuesday that'll convince me otherwise. But it is very, very concerning. And what gets me, Trump was very clear in his Truth Social post. He said she cooked the numbers. We made revisions. She made revisions after the election. They revised the jobs down. Well, that wasn't true. I mean, 2 points there. There's well-established procedures. The has nothing to do with who happens to be commissioner. They're in stone. So the revisions get made every year. And in fact, they were made in August, 2.5 months before the election. So if this was supposed to help Biden-Harris, they ain't too smart. They did it 2.5 months before the election. And it was a big story, too. They're big stories. You could look it up, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all big stories about it. And jobs numbers revised down 818,000. That was not good news for Biden-Harris. So that was outrageous. I mean, he got everything wrong. He made a statement just clearly wasn't true. She never doctored the numbers in any case, but it came out before the election. The other point that just was, incredible to me, I know Kevin Hess, and I'm not going to say we're good friends, but, I was friendly with him. I actually wrote a couple things with him. I got along with him. We could talk. He's the top economic advisor to Trump now. He's the head of the National Economic Council. I saw him on the news shows on Sunday, and he was just telling Hess it's not an idiot. I don't agree with him on everything, probably anything, but he's not an idiot. He knows the basic stories. He knows how the economic data, and he is just telling outright lies. He was just saying, the numbers are so inaccurate. Well, they're well-established procedures, and if Kevin has some way to improve the procedures, the folks at BLS would be delighted. Send them over. Sit down with them. Tell them what they're doing wrong. He knows that's not true. He doesn't have a way to improve the methods. And, of course, that wasn't why Trump fired her. He was as clear as day. He fired her not because she was incompetent. He said that explicitly. He fired her because he said she was making up phony numbers. So Kevin, good politician here, he's just changing it to try to imply the issue was that the numbers were inaccurate. It wasn't, and they weren't. So anyhow, it's just scary to me to see people that I had some respect for Kevin just get up there and tell outright lies. Just incredible.
I had some respect for Tim Cook, and he just went in with a gold phone and paid a bribe. I mean, I had some respect for Brown University.
The CEO of a very successful company.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have data now that even if the data is still good and the procedures don't change, it's going to be harder to trust because they fired the head of it because they didn't like her data. They lied and said it was fake, and then they're going to put somebody else in. And even if nothing changes, it loses its credibility.
Yeah, and it's something you can't overestimate its importance that we could get data from it. And it's not perfect. I mean, anyone familiar with the issues involved? We have a labor force of 170 million people. We have a $30 trillion economy. The idea that you just look out there, it's not like you step on the scale and it tells you weigh 170 pounds and that's it. No, this is really complicated, and a lot of very smart people work on trying to get it as good as they can. And they do a pretty damn good job. So I and other economists can know that, and people who aren't economists, but people want to go, okay, what does the economy look like? They can know that the Bureau of Labor Statistics is giving them the best numbers they could possibly do. And Trump is really calling that into question. And that's when we were talking a moment ago about whether the U.S. would be able to sell its debt. Well, that's going to be part of the story, because if no one trusts our numbers, they aren't going to want to hold our debt.
Right. So our credibility, they shatter by playing with numbers. Even if they're not, but by firing people who are giving them bad news, it looks like they're playing with numbers. The tariffs are, as you say, lacking any strategy, except possibly a corrupt one. Also, all this makes us a place where if you have a lot of money, you're not going to want to invest. And it's going to take a lot of investment to build the capacities that are needed to onshore the things that happen elsewhere. And Dean, if perfectly efficient businesses now are saying, okay, we used to spend $10 million a year and have 50 employees involved in making something that we're selling all over the world. Now we need to take that 10 million and those 50 employees to have them replace the pieces of our supply chain that we used to import. Doesn't that just make it all less efficient? We'll have less to export, let alone less to import.
Yeah, I mean, what again, you try to put yourself in the shoes of a big company. You're going, okay, we sell worldwide. The U.S. might be our biggest market, but we're selling in Europe, we're selling in China, we're selling whatever. When you expand your capacity, do you want to do it in the United States? Or do you want to do it in Europe, in Japan, in China, wherever? A lot of people are going to make the choice, Europe, Japan, China. And you're seeing that in other countries, because they could do it more openly, that you're seeing that Canada's signing trade deals with Europe. Europe's signing trade deals with Japan. Japan and Korea are signing trade deals with each other and with China. And what we're going to see is globalization minus the U.S., and that's not a good story for us from any perspective. I'm not a U.S. first that we have to be the big boss over everyone, but we also don't want to be excluded. And that's where we're going to be, because they don't want to deal with someone who's a little kid at heart and just does whatever he feels like. So he could do some of that now because, we're the big market and they don't want to lose us overnight. But our ability to do that is going to dwindle rapidly as we become a less important market for these countries, which is likely to happen very quickly.
Yeah. And parts of this have nothing to do with economics. The enormous tariff on Brazil is because they because they won't let a guy who tried to steal their democracy out of jail. And Donald Trump says, "How dare you?" Right?
Just so everyone, some of your listeners may not know, Bolsonaro literally tried to steal the election. He lost, just like Donald Trump, and obviously Trump has sympathy for this. He lost the election. It's no doubt about that. He lost the election. He tried to reverse the results with a sort of pseudo coup. They weren't able to do it. The army stood by Lula, the elected president, and now he's in jail for that, which is pretty normal. If you try to overthrow the government, you're likely to end up in jail. Not here, apparently, but in Brazil you are, and that doesn't make Trump happy.
No, so he's going after your coffee, Dean, in order to punish Brazil, because that's not an economic policy. And on the other side, the country he hasn't put any tariffs on, any new tariffs, is Russia. But he's invited Putin to Alaska, invited Putin to the United States, right? Putin can't go practically anywhere in the world because he's wanted. He has a warrant out by the International Criminal Court for stealing children and doing the other things he's done in this horrible war. But he's invited to Alaska, which used to be part of Russia, right? So to show his imperial flag, and no tariffs there. No, well, we already have some. Gee whiz.
No, it is incredible, and we're all wondering what he's obviously the agenda, again, people I'm sure know this, but the agenda for their meeting ostensibly is the Ukraine war. You might want to include Ukraine in that, but apparently not. So we'll see what they come up with.
All right, Dean, we have run up against the clock. As always, I really appreciate your time and your expertise. It matters a lot.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on. I enjoyed it.
All right. Talk to you soon. All right, everybody. That was fabulous. Dean Baker. Follow his work. You can find him online on social media and at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. We're going to take a break and your calls when we come back.
Edwin Eisendrath is taking your calls now at 773-763-9278. The Big Picture is on now. WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. Let's get going. And Jim, kick us off.
Hi, Edwin. I was just thinking of the 20s and 30s, secret police spreading from Italy to Spain to Germany. And, of course, Russia always had a kind of a version of it. And their star pupil is running the country for the last 20 years. And we know the result of the secret police there. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, you opened up with one of FDR's speeches, but one that I recall, he took a excerpt from Dante's Divine Comedy. He said the difference between a cold-blooded sin and a warm-blooded sin is like day and night. A cold-blooded sin, of course, you can draw your own conclusions. Many people suffer by it. And I would argue, in my 75 years on terra firma, that this Republican Party falls into that category. They absolutely are at war against Democrats, and they say it with impunity. And think of the people that suffer as a result of this, with Medicaid, Medicare, and we don't even know what the results are. Cutting food stamps for no reason at all. You remember Janet Yellen and Paul Krugman, probably in my mind, were two of the best economists that I can recall. And Janet Yellen would say over and over again that we were the envy of the world, our economy was the envy of the world. Well, in 6 or 7 months, this guy is on his way to destroy it. So is the Republican Party. But they're all responsible, Edwin, because they're complicit in this. And what do you think, real quick, what do you think of this, Cash Patel going after these people in Chicago? Do you think he's going to get away with this, or how do you think it's going to work out?
No. He can't get away with it lawfully, and are they willing to use force outside of the bounds of law, which is, of course, the end of every kind of freedom. Right? And they might, but they have committed no felony. They have committed no felony. Right? It is legal in America to leave your state and go to another state. Now, if you miss enough meetings in Texas, there is a civil fine the Texas is now taking this. Remember, by the way, this is the same crowd in Texas that said to the United States, you can't send your troops near our border. We are going to have the Texas National Guard patrol the border, and the U.S. isn't going to be allowed near the border so we can install our barbed wire in the river. That happened when Joe Biden was president. The United States was not allowed even to patrol the border of the country because Texas didn't want to do it itself. And the same guys who said the government can't patrol our border can somehow say, oh, we want the United States now to go arrest our citizens because they had the temerity to leave the state. You know what they're going to do next? You do know this, right? They're going to say, oh, she left the state pregnant. The FBI should go after her, too, because how dare she leave the state pregnant? Right?
Hey, real quick, I know you got a lot of calls. Real quick, I ran into a Republican runner for state senate in this state, and I didn't realize it, but he had me sign a petition. I signed it. He started telling me his politics. More police. They're so strident behind this maniac that he's going on about we should have more policing. We've got to cut the budgets in Illinois. And so, I mean, just like he was an automaton, fed all of his facts by Republican podcasters, and it was amazing to listen to it. I just walked away thinking to myself, my God, how could you? What a way to approach it politically. You ran for political. Obviously, you've got to listen about everybody, Edwin, don't you? You can't just go in there with a strident.
And then you have to work for everybody. You have to bring people together.
Right.
You have to work.
Absolutely.
Jim, look, look, I'm all for fighting hard, but I'm going to get things wrong on this show. I will. I won't purposely lie ever and make stuff up like that. I'll get stuff wrong. And by the way, if I got stuff wrong and I get called on it and I learn it, I'll then apologize.
Well, amen. Yeah, same here. My God, I'm not the Alpha and the Omega by any means. Edwin, you have a great weekend. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you, Jim. All right, Dave, you're next.
Hey, Edwin. Been a while.
Welcome back.
You too. You see that story with that self-described Christian nationalist pastor Douglas Wilson, part of a ascendant group?
I missed that story.
All right, this guy
Tell me about it.
All right, I'll try to do it quickly if I can. Part of an ascendant group of Christian religious leaders finding influence among MAGA conservatives. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is Wilson's most prominent and public follower in the Trump administration, and his church is based in Moscow, Idaho. Home of the supremacists. And this guy, his teachings and talkings or whatever to help Hegseth, bolster his views about women to know their place and antipathy towards women in the armed forces and that they shouldn't serve, et cetera. Basically the old barefoot and pregnant type of thing, to serve the men at home and that. Funny. Back when President Obama, remember how the right lost their collective minds over his then pastor, Jeremiah Wright?
Yes.
Hypocrisy, thy name is MAGA. It's kind of like history rhyming a little bit there. And, you were mentioning about, at the start of the show, about with Trump going to be, Donald, the real deal is going to be meeting with Putin in Alaska. And about that land swap or whatever with about Ukraine and they're not having Ukraine there. Well, do you think that perhaps Trump is going to be talking about going and to reverse the steward's folly and give Alaska back to Russia?
No, but he may say, "I'll give you Ukraine, but you have to help me get Greenland." It's how he thinks, and it's awful.
Yeah. But that given Ukraine, and I've said for years now since it started, it's going to be just like my people in Finland when Russia attacked Finland. They had to give up eastern third or so of the country to Russia. That time, the Karelia stretch there and that. And I've said all along they're going to either give up that southeastern portion of Ukraine eventually. I know Zelensky don't want to, but how long is he going to let they can't let the slaughter keep going on, so, but.
Well, let's see. I mean, if the United States were helping Ukraine, Russia has not prosecuted this war well. We can continue to do. We might be able to push Russia out and say you can't just militarily change the boundaries of countries in Europe. But those days, the Republicans don't believe that anymore. They believe might makes right. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it.
Edwin, quick one you might like. I was just reading, when Trump been kind of stiffing, or the U.S. been stiffing weapons to Ukraine. I was reading where some of them they had made with Pringles cans. Explosives on their
they're very creative.
Yes, very, very. So anyway, all right, let me clear off. Have a good one, Edwin.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Paul, you're next.
What I hear about, Trump, the Republicans have thrown the rules out, and then the analogies about Democrats, bringing the nail files to a gunfight. I think about, remember in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid when the big guy, Harvey, the Lurch, the guy who plays with Ted Cassidy, pulls a knife on Butch Cassidy and Paul Newman says, wait a minute, we got a knife fight. We got to get the rules straight. And the guy,
am I left-handed or am I right-handed?
Yeah, the rules in a knife fight. He says, Paul Newman says, okay, somebody say go. Sundance says, 1, 2, 3, go. We kicked him right in the crotch.
Yeah.
I wish Democrats had that kind of, they had that kind of head awareness to play that way.
I think we're playing tough now. I don't know. I think Democrats are playing a lot tougher. Not everyone, but a lot of them. I mean, they wouldn't let them off the hook on Epstein. When they come back, they're not going to let them off the hook on Epstein. They're not letting them off the hook on. And so far, they are not, okaying the appropriations deals to keep the government open without getting stuff in return. They won't do it. So that's tough, and that's in Washington, where they've really lost the muscle to have this fight, but they're getting it back. And again, Dick Durbin has been awesome about the stuff he's finding as the ranking member on Judiciary, and he's not a spring chicken. He's not running again, but he's going out like a lion. And governors around the country, they're stepping up, and I listen to state legislators, oh my gosh, they are ready to rumble.
Well, tit for tat, in psychological gaming, they've found that all of the strategies, all the complex computer-generated strategies, like they have that psychological gaming convention at the University of Michigan, the one that works is tit for tat. You do, you treat me well, I'll treat you well. You be a jerk to me, I'll be a jerk to you. So I wanted to say about your guest that was, an hour ago, who was saying he wasn't so sure that America was degenerated into fascism quite yet. When in the light of the fact that an appeals court has thrown out the contempt charge of a lower court, it's like, okay, so then what we're saying is enforcing the Constitution, enforcing the law, is a political question. That's really what he's saying, is that because if the court can't have absolutely...
You're talking about what happened with Boasberg, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that may... Look, this may go to the full appellate panel, and we may see a different result. But you're right. At the moment, we're not in a good place.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that if enforcing, clear constitutional standards is a political question, well, fascism is a political construct. So, basically what we're saying is that, if the other two branches if have the majority such that the executive and the Congress want to have fascism, then I guess the political question is that, we are free enough that we can have fascism for a little while. But fascism doesn't go away.
You can have it, but there isn't any little while. Right.
That's right, because fascism is like nail fungus. It doesn't go away. It's an infection, right? And you have to take systemic medication to get rid of it. You can't put topical fixes. It takes I had that once, and I had to take this really expensive... The Soviet Union lasted
60 years. The Ayatollahs have lasted, I don't know, they've been there for 40 years. When you get there and you get entrenched, right, the people don't matter. Oh,
that's
Paul,
right.
Another week.
Yeah.
Another week.
Okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Take care. Yep.
Bye-bye. David, you're next.
Oh, thanks, Ed. A couple of good calls there. I'm not sure if America really needs to go, gunfight, knife fight, because I find there are a lot of opportunities to challenge the poor peasants of Texas, for example. If you look economically at the state of Texas right now, about a month ago, they signed a law saying that fracking water is okay to put on agricultural fields. Now, if you know what's in fracking water, you know it's friggin' toxic, and it's radioactive toxic. And so if we were to just start a campaign, boycott agricultural products from Texas because they're going to use fracking water, that might slow them down just a little bit. But in the last week, I've called probably 20 stations down there and used the phrase that the governor and the attorney general of Texas are obeying a child molester. and I got on KLBJ, the big station down in Austin, and I got on there 2 days in a row saying the same thing. And they say, well, the governor and the attorney general are listening to you. And I said, yeah, they're obeying a child molester. And so, you get that out there often enough, all of a sudden the people of Texas have got to figure out whether they've got hind legs to stand up on or whether they're going to drink. And in fact, the fracking water can now be put into rivers. So they're going to go down and think that they can go have their dog drink out of a stream. They can accept water into their water plants that are tainted with fracking water. No, the state of Texas, that state is so big. It's 1/3 the size of the lower 48 states. And for two guys to be so corrupt and to be able to poison the land of the 1/3 of the lower 48 and to then sabotage the democracy of America is, it's crippling, but it's the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And that one last caller, he was talking about whether we're in fascism. If you look at the definition of fascism, it started from Mussolini. And he and a guy named Rocco came up with the Treatise on Fascism. And in it, they described this round table of government that's run by all of these monopolies. And that all of the monopolies face off against a president. The people can still elect a president, but that president has to be pretty clever and wise to be able to compete with all of the monopolies. Well, if you start looking at the elections after that, the monopolies don't want a wise and clever person. They want somebody they can milk for all they're worth. And so it's to their advantage to elect somebody who's a vain fool. And that's how we got Donald Trump.
Systems are corrupt. Yeah, they're very corrupt. Yeah, they want somebody who the cost of doing business is show up with a gold phone and they'll get rid of your tariffs. Yeah, crazy.
Well, and just to wrap up, too, you look at America was founded on taxation with representation. Well, Donald Trump and Michael Johnson, Big Beautiful Bill, is representation without taxation. So we, the people, get to pay the taxes, and we get crap for representation, and the rich never have to pay taxes, and they get all of the representation. So it flies in the face of America. So I don't think we need to come to violence. We just need to say this stuff over and over and over again. And finally,
just so we're clear, I want to be clear. I am not counseling violence. I do not countenance violence. I do not believe in political violence. On the contrary, I think it is a terrible thing. And the tit for tat I'm talking about is they're going to raise dark money. We're going to have to do it until we can make it illegal. They're going to gerrymander. It's absolutely horrible. We'll do it to stop them. And when we win, we'll make them both illegal. But under no circumstances will we follow them down the road of lying about everything and of political violence, of this vigilante violence, of threatening judges, of shooting. That absolutely is not something I will ever countenance, and our side doesn't.
Right. That's well said. And just a quick one. Out here in California, I work on pollution issues, and I see that what Trump and his cronies are doing is sabotaging every lawsuit against every corporation that ever happened, and pollution is a big part of it. And so every time it falls to violence, it ends up destroying the evidence. So, they end up burning. We're already seeing the EPA being destroyed. The evidence locker of all of the pollution cases is being destroyed. But if it comes to violence, then that pollution gets spread. So we need to clean up the pollution. We need to clean up the corporate crimes, and we need to maintain the evidence so that these cronies can go to prison like where they belong.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, David. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you being part of the show. Yep. All right. I'm going. Brian, you're next.
Hey, good afternoon. I called in because I like to put on the table how we need to stop funding the nation of Israel. And I think it'd be a dynamite issue for the Democrats to latch onto for the upcoming elections. I mean, just from the simple fact, the Congress has just taken a big chunk out of domestic spending, right? Nearly $1 trillion has been taken away from the American people, or more probably. And, we're more in debt nationally than the Israelis are. But yet we give them money all the time. And I know it's a roundabout bribe to American defense contractors because that's where most of the money ends up, so they can buy the attack helicopters and the supersonic jet fighters to bomb Palestinians with. And I think we need to stop funding Israel. Multiple presidents have told them to stop the settlement activity, to work towards peace with the Palestinians, and the right-wing Israelis ignore us, do what they want, and then I will guarantee before the year's out there will be a funding bill moving through Congress to fund more money to the Israelis. So I'm hearing media reports how they're really wearing down the IDF. So I think it's ridiculous war that Netanyahu has just conducted and his criminal behavior in Gaza. And there is not one reason in the world another American tax dollar should flow to the state of Israel. And that should be a front row issue for the Democratic Party. And that'll get some media attention. Would you agree?
Oh, it'll get more than media attention. I'm not sure that media attention, but you're starting to see that. Amy Klobuchar, who has been a big supporter of Israel's in the United States Senate, is saying that she, is not going to support additional funding right now for Israel. I mean, what's happened? Whatever horror was the reason that this war began on October 7th. What's happened in Gaza is unacceptable, and the United States should be leading in the fight for peace, not ignoring that in order to prolong war. And that we do not have the president to do that. Congress will follow. I think Americans are sick to death of what they're seeing on TV over there. So this won't happen with this president and his fake fights about anti-Semitism. But I think Israel just, and I'm a fan of Israel.
Commentary.
This fight has been terrible. Yep.
Remember Trump went out there and said how we're going to take control of Gaza? Remember him doing that?
Yeah.
It seems like our corporate-controlled media just forgets all about it. It's like,
well, when was the last time you heard him talk about he was going to take over Greenland, too?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's time our media stops giving him a pass on all of his idiotic statements. If we're going to cover his statements, do the follow-up work. That's part of the job. Instead of just follow him along on the latest idiotic fight he has with Rosie O'Donnell or whoever.
Or ignore it and
that's
talk about
piece.
the damage he's actually doing.
But not another dollar for the Israelis.
Well, who might agree with you? There are 1 million Israelis tonight out protesting against their government's action in Gaza. 1 million out protesting. They would agree with you. All right, thank you. Where am I? Brian.
Hi, this is Joe in Chicago.
Oh, Joe. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hi, Joe.
Thanks for another interesting. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for another interesting show. Great guest as usual. I just wanted to make a comment on what I usually do, and my concern about the Democrats not having a unified leadership team, like a unified spokesperson team. There are separate camps that are divided and get conquered. And with the redistricting, this is going to happen again. Each state's going to do their own thing, their own debate about morality and this and that and strategy. Instead, all the governors that can make a change need to be together immediately and come out of a plan immediately with all the new maps to show the Republicans what they're going to do right now, period, unless there's a nationwide nonpartisan districting legislated right now. No delay. This circuit breaker thing is a joke. By delaying, we just get into this crazy debate.
Hang on, Joe. The laws in each state about this are different. There isn't a blanket approach that works.
Correct. So all they have to do, right? I'm sorry. All they have to do is say the laws are no longer existing because the Republicans are violating the laws, and therefore this is what we're doing.
We don't do that.
Meanwhile, they can go ahead and go through the procedure simultaneously, but publicly show the Republicans what's going to happen at the end. Now,
well, you got
a year later.
You got the three biggest Democratic states, New York, California, and Illinois, have said it. And they've said, we're going to do this. You do it, we're doing it. So that's a lot of pressure.
But they need to show.
No, we're ready to do it. They're ready to do it. Yeah. Absolutely.
They're not. What's going to happen is that each state's going to get bogged down in their own moral debate as time goes on. They didn't do this in Texas. There's no debate. They just said, we're doing this.
Well,
if you give them time, if you let this percolate, we get divided and conquered. We have to be unified. We can't have this internal debate about which direction to go in. We need to do it.
I agree with. Well, Joe, I agree totally. We need to be unified, but I actually think this time we are. I mean, and we're giving home to the folks who fled Texas. Like we are saying to Texas, you're not getting away with it this time, buddy. We'll take your people. We will keep them safe. You can send your Texas Rangers, however you want. We're going to put our guards here. We're keeping them safe. You want to come to our city and try and get them back? Good luck. And by the way, this is coming at you. We will do the same thing here.
It's all good. All these governors need to show a unified force together. With a unified
so you plan. Want them standing? You want them in the same room at a press conference?
I want them in the same room, and I want them all to produce maps of what they're going to do. And
I hear you.
Show them.
I hear you.
Show us.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, maybe next week we'll see those maps. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, Roosevelt, you got 2 minutes.
I'm sorry?
You got 2 minutes.
Oh, that's a lot of time. Thank you. Double lead. Thank you for taking my call. I want to follow up on what you and your guest were talking about earlier when you guys mentioned the Godfather gold phone and Trump getting from Tim Cook 24-karat Apple. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm getting at is out in the open, he's getting gifts when a president is not supposed to get gifts from anybody. Out in the open, he goes and spends $10 million of our taxes to go open up a golf course in Scotland, his mother's motherland. Okay? So they're not hiding it anymore. I'm talking about Trump's
corruption? No, they're not hiding it. They're bragging about it. They put the sign out that says for sale. Bring me the most. What is all that crypto for?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And what is the Doge or whatever the waste and abuse? And I want to connect that with the fact that what he did when he slapped Brazil with a what? I don't know. I lose track of all these numbers. 50%, 51%.
50. 50.
Yeah, 50%. Because of the fact that Bolsonaro, I cannot believe, and I'm sorry to say this, but I cannot believe that Brazil has a better democracy than we have when it comes down to the corruption. Because the Bolsonaro is paying the price. And here, this guy, we voted him in. We did the exit. We rewarded him, a 34-time felon. And then I want to connect that with all these leaders of South American countries, such as Bukele from El Salvador. What's the other guy? Petro from, I believe he's in Colombia. The guy in Argentina, which he invited over here to attend CPAC. So his connection to criminals is without merit. There's no president has ever had the connections that this guy is. And then speaking of the Fed spending money, aren't you tired of Trump traveling around the world on our dime and hooking up with Russia to talk about the so-called peace talks when the president of Ukraine is not even invited? That is ridiculous.
Rosa, we're out of time, my friend. Thank you for that. Yeah. And yes, he wasn't invited and Europe wasn't invited. Go figure. These guys just think they can rule on their own. Dictators through and through. All right, everybody. Listen, thank you for your time this week. Go on my Substack. It's the Democracy Stupid. And look, the opening that I gave, I also wrote and put there. It's worth looking again at FDR's comments at about what it takes to sustain a democracy when it's under attack. And it's all about making life better for people who live here, the things that this administration is taking away. Talk to you next week. Take care.